hunted by the Shadow Alpha. The forest swallowed the sound of her footsteps, but Abigail knew it only masked her from lesser hunters. The wilds were never this quiet. Not when she was running. Not when something relentless paced her shadow. Cold air stung her throat with every breath. Damp fern fronds slapped at her legs and slick roots tried to take her down. She caught herself on a birch trunk, bark biting her palm, and pushed off again, lungs burning as if she had swallowed smoke. Keep moving. Her inner wolf throbbed against her ribs, a low drumbeat of urgency. The instinct to shift clawed up her spine, promising speed, promising strength, promising teeth. She forced it down. In fur, she would leave a cleaner scent trail. In fur, she would be a prize on 4 legs. In fur, she would run faster. Yes, but not faster than the thing behind her. The satchel at her hip thumped against her thigh. It held a leaf-wrapped bundle of feverfew, a twist of willow bark, a little bone-handled knife stained green from cutting stems, a healer's life in a bag. Useless against claws. Useless against the whispered accusation that had torn her life to pieces before the moon had cleared the treetops. Murderous. The word followed her like smoke under a door. The beta had died in her arms, his weight heavy and failing, his breath sour with iron. She had pressed her hands to the wound, whispering for him to stay, begging his chest to rise, begging the heat not to leave his skin. He had gripped her wrist with surprising strength and pulled her close. Not you. The memory snapped like a twig underfoot. Then his fingers had slackened, and the courtyard torches had blurred. She had lifted her hands, blood to the wrists, and the people who had come running had flinched as if the sight of a healer's stained palms could strike them dead. You killed him. A woman from the kitchens had covered her mouth, eyes bright with fear. One of the young warriors had reached for his blade, hands shaking. The Alpha's voice had thundered from the steps, everything in it meant to anchor a pack about to break. Seize her. Abigail had run before the hands reached her. Feet on stone, then feet on dirt, then feet on roots and moss and shadows. She had run because she knew how fast rumor could harden into law and how fast law could harden into death when a pack needed someone to blame. She had run because the beta had managed one more breath that was not a breath at all, only a shred of voice. A last-shaped thought pressed between his teeth and into her ear. Wrong wolf. Now the forest pressed close, needles and leaves whispering like 1,000 quiet judgments. Branches snatched at her hair, and the taste of copper wouldn't leave her tongue. She angled downslope toward a creek and plunged her boots into icy water, numbing the fire in her calves. The current tugged at her with blunt hands. She crouched, scooped the silty cold onto her neck and wrists, then rubbed crushed yarrow over her pulse points until the sharp green scent stung her nose. Hide what you can. Her wolf paced tight circles under her skin, uneasy, not at the thought of enforcers at her back, but at something else. The wind shifted. The pine tang of the wilds passed over her, then colder notes rolled in, strange as a stranger's breath in a familiar room, and not them. Her head snapped up. She froze, hearing nothing but the creek's chatter and her own breathing. She pushed off the bank and moved along the water, steps placed carefully on stones. A brown owl drifted low over her, silent as falling ash. She tracked the bird without moving her head. Every thread of her attention stretched thin. A twig popped somewhere in the trees beyond the far bank. Too steady, not the jitter of a rabbit or the skitter of a fox. It came again, spaced the way a hunter spaces his breath. Behind you. The voice inside her was at her shoulder now, not down in her gut where it usually lived. She didn't look back. Looking back slowed you, turned you into prey in your own mind. She kept to the stones until the creek shallowed and the far bank broke into a stand of firs thick with fallen needles. The softness underfoot gave her the illusion of speed, and she let it lie to her because the truth would have stopped her heart. The wilds had a scent for everything: rain coming, deer browsing, the musk of boars rooting up bulbs. Tonight, there was a new strand braided into the cold air. Smoke. Not the friendly smoke of cooking fires, but something darker. Older. Smoke and stone. Smoke and that humming edge her body recognized before her mind could catch up. Run. She lengthened her stride. The sky between the branches was a dark slate. The moon veiled thinly enough to throw a low silver wash through the wood. Mist pooled in hollows and caught at her ankles. Twice she slipped, and twice her wolf threw her weight sideways at the last second to keep her upright. Her chest burned. Her lips felt numb. Sap stung a row of scratches on her arm, and the sting kept her present when everything in her wanted to float up and away from her own body. Voices reached her from uphill, distorted by trees. Men speaking low, the words indistinct. She veered left, then right again, as a pale trunk reared up where she had expected darkness. A figure appeared between two pines, and she jerked to a halt, with her hand on the knife at her belt. He lifted both palms. Easy. His hair fell into his eyes, and his coat looked like it had belonged to someone else first. He had a hunter's stillness, worn in, not practiced. You're lost. The man spoke quietly, eyes flicking over her shoulder. I'm not. You shouldn't be alone out here. I'm not. The lie came out flat. He studied her face as if cataloging her story and the lines around her mouth. The air around them held a sour edge of fear that didn't belong to either of them. They're combing the ridge above. His eyes narrowed, and something like pity passed over his expression. Whoever you're not running from, you should keep not running a little longer. I know these woods. Then you know this path narrows and the rock shelf crumbles halfway to nowhere. He nodded to the left, toward a gully where the ferns grew tall. Cut through. It's sloppier, but it keeps you off silhouettes. And keep your head down. Why help me? He half smiled, not pleased, not unkind. I have a son who asks why men with weapons hunt anything that can look back at them. I ran out of answers he liked. He swallowed, gaze sliding up past her shoulder. Go. She moved. He did not follow. The moment broke apart around her like ice under a boot. She crashed through the ferns, ducked under a deadfall, and felt the cool brush of moss against her cheek as she slid down the side of the gully on loose needles. Stones rattled. Somewhere behind, the quiet man's brave lie reached the men on the ridge. She went that way. Her inner wolf threw its head back and laughed without humor. Good man. Dead man if the wrong ears hear him too often. Abigail clawed up the far side of the gully and ran. Her thighs shuddered. Her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. She took a mouthful of air as if swallowing water, and tasted the metallic flatness of fear again. It sat wrong on her tongue like a word pronounced poorly. The scent hit her harder now that she wasn't by the creek. Smoke and stone, but threaded with pine resin so faint it might be imagined. It crept into her lungs and warmed them against the cold, and the wrongness of that almost made her stop. Warmth was not what you felt when danger closed the distance. Warmth was a hearth and a cup. Warmth was a body next to yours in a bed you trusted. Warmth was not this. You're slowing. The voice inside had become a cool, stern companion, not begging anymore but setting terms. She pushed harder, stumbled through a tangle of alder saplings, and snagged her sleeve on a thorn. The cloth ripped. The sound was too loud in the hush. She yanked free and left a strip of fabric fluttering. The thought of it leading someone to her like a story breadcrumb made her throat tighten. She doubled back 3 paces and rubbed mud into the torn edge, then grabbed a twist of sweet fern, crushed it, and smeared the resin over her palms and neck. Mask the pulse, mask the fear. The wilds began to rise again, the slope shoving her toward a ridgeline. The trees changed here. The pines grew older, their trunks wide enough to hide behind, their roots like the backs of sleeping beasts. In places, bare rock pushed up through the soil, and the lichen clung to it like faded maps. As she climbed, the soundscape thinned. The owl was gone. The small night lives tucked themselves deeper. Even the wind seemed to step back, as if making room. She crested a knoll and nearly fell on her face when her boot skidded on a slick sheet of moss. She caught herself with both hands and crouched there, chest heaving. Below, A narrow path ran along the ridge, then ended abruptly at a broken ledge where starlight made the drop look like a dagger's glittering edge. The hunter had been right. The way narrowed to nothing. To the left, the ground pitched into a thicket that would slow anything bigger than a fox. To the right, the pitch was less steep, but the trees thinned, exposing anyone moving there to the sky's pale attention. The scent found her again, closer as if the wind had learned her name. Not them. Her wolf pressed harder at the inside of her skull. Not men. Not your pack. The other one. The one the stories use to make pups sleep or wake screaming. You don't believe those stories. I didn't. The wolf's tone had no humor left. Run anyway. Abigail slid down the right-hand slope on bent knees, using trees as brakes, palms burning from bark and grit. The night felt thicker here, the darkness layered. She slipped between two boulders that leaned into each other like old friends and felt the air change on the far side. Colder, cleaner, like the inner breath of the mountain. The path widened a little and then widened more, opening onto a long glade with grass cropped low by deer. Moonlight washed it faintly, enough to throw her own shadow ahead of her, long and frantic. She didn't mean to slow. Her body did it for her. The glade had the careful look of a clearing kept clear, not by chance, not by wind. The trees around it were set back just enough to make her feel seen. A boulder anchored the center, its top smooth as a table, its sides furred with lichen. A fox crossed the far edge, glanced at her with yellow eyes, then slipped into the trees without a sound. Abigail's breath smoked faintly in front of her. The air tasted like water that had been melted from something old. The wilds are not yours, and whose are they? The answer rose in her as if her bones had known before her mind did. She didn't clutch it. She let it sit in her, heavy and sure as a stone. A breeze raked the grass and the hairs along her forearms lifted. Not from cold, from attention. Don't stop. The voice inside had shed every other tone. It was only command now. She took a step. Another. The urge to bolt made her teeth hurt. The urge to stand very still and make herself small made her stomach hollow out. She split the difference and walked, poised to run, pulse thudding at the base of her throat like a trapped bird. The forest behind her seemed to lean closer. The hush deepened. It was the quiet of a held breath. The quiet of a song paused before the last note. The quiet of a door about to open on a room nobody should enter without permission. The boulder's smooth top caught a clean slice of moonlight, and she saw that someone had set their hand there once, many times, the way the lichen grew thinner in the place where skin had touched stone. She wasn't alone, not in the child sense of monsters under beds, in the adult sense of knowing you are under a roof that can decide it does not want you anymore. She tasted the idea like she tasted the air, like she could move it with her tongue. Abigail. Her name wasn't spoken in the glade. It was spoken inside her, a vibration up her spine. Her inner wolf froze, ears pricked, then flattened. The reaction was nothing like the flares of instinct she was used to. It felt like one wolf meeting the shadow of another across a long distance and recognizing it as not a rumor, but a fact. Who? The silence stretched. The breeze ran one way and then the other as if trying doors. She wanted desperately to turn and stare into the trees at her back, to prove something to herself that she couldn't name. Don't give him your back, she obeyed, not because obedience came naturally, but because terror did. And it dressed itself as wisdom and slid its hands into hers. She reached for the knife at her belt and laid her palm over the handle. The little blade was comfortable against her skin. It knew herbs better than flesh. It would do what it could. The clearing watched her. If there had been birds, if there had been crickets, she could have told herself a story about how ridiculous she was being. There were none. There was the grass, and the stone, and the thin silver light, and the rough patch of breath in her throat, and the drum under her breastbone that would not slow. Footsteps, not a rush, not a scramble or a sprint or the panicked rhythm of someone late to their own escape. Slow, deliberate, close enough to break twigs and far enough to deny her the shape of what broke them. She knew hunters who moved like ghosts. This was not that. This was movement that wanted to be heard. This was confidence softened into arrogance and then honed again into something colder. Her wolf pushed into her throat and would have climbed out through her teeth if the body allowed such things. It paced, it pressed. It filled her mouth with taste, and her nose with scent, and her head with a single command hammered into 100 variants. Turn, don't turn, run, don't run. Make yourself more dangerous than you feel. Her fingers tightened on the knife's handle. The footsteps came on, untroubled by her prayers, the measured tread of something that had time and used it. The line of trees at the clearing's edge deepened, as if the dark there had thickened and curled in on itself. Abigail found her breath counting the steps when her mind refused to do the math. Closer. She took one step backward to balance the forward pressure, the way a dancer yields to an unseen partner before the music begins in earnest. The grass whispered against her boots. The sound felt too loud, as if she had shouted, "Show your teeth." Her wolf was not speaking of her mouth. Abigail lifted her gaze to the line of trees and held it there, the way she had once held a line of stitches closed while frantic hands crowded her shoulders. She made her face still. She widened her stance a fraction. She rolled her shoulders back and made room in her lungs for more air even though it did not want to come. The footsteps stopped just inside the tree line where the moonlight couldn't reach. The not silence bared its throat. She was not sure which of them drew the first breath after that. The dark at the tree line thickened, pulled itself together, and stepped into the clearing on 4 paws. He was huge, a black shadow given muscle and breath, coat drinking the moonlight until there was almost nothing left for the grass. Amber eyes found her like a hand on the back of her neck. He began to circle, slow and patient, as if the night were a room he owned, and she was the only thing inside it worth attention. Her palm closed over the dagger at her belt. The little blade felt like a lie. She lifted it anyway and turned with him, keeping his face in view. Breath scraped in and out of her chest in tight pulls. Her inner wolf braced hard against her bones. "Hold ground, don't bolt, make him work for every inch." The black wolf lowered his head and drew a long breath that crossed the space and touched her skin. A quiet shiver ran through her, as if the air itself had teeth. He drifted closer, paws silent, chest steady. "You run well." The voice wasn't a sound. It moved through her the way cold moves through water. She couldn't tell if it came from him or from some older part of her that understood him too well. She lunged first, the blade flashed, he flowed right under it, shoulder striking her forearm with clean force. The dagger spun into the grass and vanished. She reached with her eyes, not her hand, too slow to even know where it went. He surged in, a streak of heavy darkness. The ground took her weight, the ground took his. Paws pinned her shoulders with a precision that felt like choice rather than accident. "Don't bare your throat." Her chin wanted to tilt, she fought it down and stared up, pulse kicking hard enough to hurt. His breath slid across her cheek. Smoke. Stone. A thin thread of pine resin, faint and sharp, catching on places inside her that had nothing to do with lungs. "Why aren't you killing me?" The question rose and hung between their eyes. Her wolf didn't answer. It watched too, caught by something it refused to name. He released her the second after she refused to look away. The weight lifted, not in mercy, but as if the test was over. Fur rippled, bones shifted, and the change moved through him with the certainty of a tide. Where paws had pressed her down, hands hung at a man's sides. He stood over her, tall, shoulders cut from work, black hair falling across his brow, amber gaze unchanged and fixed like a mark carved into stone. He looked like the forest would look if it ever decided to walk. No softness, no need to prove anything. The night rested easy on his skin as if it belonged there. She pushed to her elbows. Earth gritted her palms. She didn't reach for the knife. He knew exactly where it had landed. He would only make her feel slow for trying. "You run well, healer. Let me go. You're accused of killing your beta." "I didn't." Silence settled between them, not as a pause but as a deliberate choice. He closed the last of the space between them by inches, not pushing her back, not offering comfort, only stepping into the air she needed. Fingers tipped with heat lifted her chin. His thumb rested just below her ear, pulse close. He studied her, cataloging the fear, the anger, the stubbornness that refused to step aside for either. Confessions come easier in the dark. You want a lie. I want what lives under lies. Sometimes you reach it faster by taking away everything else first. Her wolf's teeth bared along the inside of her throat. Take nothing. A soft scuff in the trees pulled his attention sideways. He didn't let go of her. He didn't need both hands to own a moment. A man stepped out of the shadow to her left, all lean lines and quiet balance, pale hair catching a thread of moon. Ridged to the west, the newcomer kept his voice low and even, eyes cutting from Abigail to the trees. 3 moving. Not ours. The word landed inside her and went colder than the air. Silver pine. The ones she had lived and bled with. The ones who had decided she was easier to chase than the truth. You're leaving with me. No, you can walk or I can carry you. Your choice changes only the angle of your view. Her jaw clenched. She put her feet under her and stood, not because she agreed, but because she refused to be carried if she could help it. His hand slid from the line of her jaw to the inside of her elbow, not squeezing, just occupying the space there like it had paid for it. He steered her toward the trees. The pale-haired man took point, ghost quiet. Name. Raphael. The syllables held iron. The night listened the way old things listen when something familiar is spoken. Her skin prickled along her arms. Abigail Veyra. He didn't ask. The set of his mouth said he already knew. He guided her into the dark, not hurrying, scent wrapping around her the way heat wraps cold hands and makes them ache. Why me? Because you're mine to deal with, and I'm not yours, and you will learn how wrong you are. Taron flowed ahead through the trees, head tilted like a wolf's when it drinks in sound. He lifted 2 fingers and angled left. Raphael drew Abigail with him, off the faint path and into a slope littered with roots. He never once looked down to place his feet. When she misjudged a step and slid, his palm caught her hip and steadied her. Heat flashed through her belly even as anger flared bright. Don't thank him, not a chance. Raphael's inner wolf pressed forward in his chest, calm and merciless. Claim her. The pulse under your thumb is almost singing. Not yet. Always not yet. Patience makes the taste sharpen. Taron paused, fingers opening and closing once. 2 behind us, closer than they should be. 1 young, 1 new. They cut wrong for this rock. Let them think we crossed at the altar and doubled back. Taron peeled away to the left without a sound. Raphael guided Abigail to the right, through a screen of hazel and down a short drop that put cold damp through the leather of her boots. The scent of a stream moved from somewhere ahead and to the side. He did not take her into it. He set her on stones, then moved her off again, pulling her scent in lines that would confuse a less practiced nose. You like this? The thought pushed out before she could stop it. I like what stays, and I'm not staying. You're already here. They reached a shallow slope of bare rock where lichen clung in maps and the wind bit more cleanly. He took her wrist and placed her hand on a notch that fit her fingers perfectly, then found her knee when she slipped and set it back on rough stone. He followed close enough that the warmth off him reached the backs of her legs. The idea of falling into him and letting his body take the impact rose up and made her angry with herself. Don't want this, want it anyway. The answer came not from her mind, but from the raw corner in her that kept a list of the things she'd been denied and put heat next to them like a promise. At the base of the slope, Taron waited in a squat, gaze turned uphill. He lifted a hand once in warning. A shape detached from the dark to their left, then held, then backed out again. Human. The quiet of the wilds tightened between heartbeats. Raphael's knife appeared in his palm with no drama. The shape lunged from the brush, young and quick and shaking a little with the kind of fear that makes hands clumsy. The strike was clean. A forearm met a throat and turned the rush into a gasp that never finished. The blade kissed skin behind an ear and came away wet. The body folded and didn't try to get back up. The forest received it without a ripple. He was someone's, everyone is. You didn't have to kill him, he didn't have to be here. Taron's head lifted, listening hard. One left, smarter than this one, already learned to back away. Let him run. Taron slipped into the trees after the fading sound, not to catch but to keep the distance honest. Raphael cleaned the knife on the dead boy's sleeve and slid it home as neatly as a thought put back where it belongs. His hand returned to Abigail's elbow, and a fresh thread of heat braided through the fear in her pulse. Why keep me alive if you want a confession? Because confessions are nothing, bonds are everything. I won't give you one. You'll give me what I want because you will want it too. The certainty in his voice made her want to cut him open and see where he hid it. The fury rose bright, and then burned on a darker fuel she didn't want to think about. They moved again, the forest closing them in and then opening just enough to let them pass. The climb grew steeper, the air thinned and turned cleaner. Mist gathered in the low places and beaded in her hair. Her legs shook with a pull she couldn't hide. The hand at her elbow shifted to her waist, then lifted away when she found steadier ground as if he was teaching her a lesson and letting her keep it. Don't help me, you don't need my help, you need my walls. Taron returned at a jog soft enough to ignore. He fell into step ahead without a word, then spoke low without looking back. They left a sign on the old trail, a circle around a cross. They'll read it. They'll be angry. Let them read and let them be angry. They crested a rise and air moved more freely. The night widened. Through a break in the trees, a narrow sword of light showed high and far. Windows, not a campfire. Abigail's chest tightened around something she didn't have a name for. Safety was a lie with teeth. Danger at least had faces she recognized. A door could keep danger out and trap her inside all at once. You're bringing me to your den. I'm bringing you where I decide what we are, yet we are nothing, and not yet. The last stretch climbed in two narrow ribs of stone. Taron took the left and tested each cut step with sure weight. Raphael steered Abigail to the right path where the outside edge fell steeply into dark. The steps were closer together there. The cliff pressed a little against her shoulder. The placement forced her lean toward him whether she wanted to or not. Of course he chose this one. Wind came cold around the shoulder of the mountain and stole what heat remained from her damp skin. Her body shuddered before pride could lock it down. He stopped without making a point of it. One arm came around, sheltering without dragging her against him. Breath warmed the crown of her head for the space of 2 steady counts. You're shaking, and it's cold, and it's also fear. Do you want applause for noticing? Name the weather, choose your coat. The wind softened. He took his arm away that last inch and let the absence of heat teach her its own lesson. She climbed the final steps with jaw tight and back straight, because she refused to let her legs show anything he could use as leverage. The path leveled into stone set by hands that needed ground to work and not look pretty. The smell of wood smoke reached them full, dry and steady and threaded with the faint animal warmth of a lived-in place. Raphael's inner wolf lifted its head. Home. Bring her inside. We will. You make a meal better by letting it starve a little first. You know me too well. They made a final turn around a spur of rock and the lodge appeared. Dark timber shouldered out of the mountain, roof laid in slate that shone faintly with dew. Windows were small and deep, light sitting in them like held embers. A porch ran the length of the front, its posts carved with marks worn smooth by years of palms. No other houses, no kennel chorus. The land around it felt like a chest held still on purpose. Abigail stopped without meaning to. The building looked back at her with a patience as complete as Raphael's. The air around her thinned, as if it had waited too long, and now wanted her to make up her mind. Taron went up the steps and pushed the door. Warmth spilled out in a soft rectangle. He held the door without fuss, gaze sliding once to Raphael, for a signal that wasn't for her. Raphael stood close enough behind her that the small hairs at the nape of her neck lifted. He didn't touch her. The hand that had owned her elbow had learned the shape of waiting. When he leaned in finally, his breath moved a lock of hair and the sound of his voice brushed her ear. Walk. No. You can walk. Or I can carry you past my beta and my maid and the warrior who already doesn't like you. Either way, you cross this threshold with me. Her wolf threw curses that would have scorched bark if the trees understood them. Pride lifted her chin while anger steadied her steps. She crossed the porch as if it had been her idea, as if the wood underfoot belonged to her feet and not to him. Inside, the air would be warmer. Inside, the scent of him would root in the walls. Inside, she would be within arm's reach whenever he wanted to cross a room. She knew all of that, and still moved forward because backing away would be too much like surrender, and running would be a confession she refused to make. At the threshold, a girl no older than 19 stood with her hands knotted in her apron, big eyes flicking between the three of them. Small and quick, dark hair braided tight, a pulse like a frightened bird at the hollow of her throat. My lordy Leora. The girl's gaze settled on Abigail, kindness leaking past fear before caution pulled it back. You'll want water, and food, and a place to wash. Abigail stared at the girl's throat and saw a life that woke with chores and ended with quiet dreams. The kindness in the offer stung far worse than cruelty. Taron closed the door softly once they were all inside, and the mountain held its breath around the room, as if listening for what Raphael would do next. He reached past Leora to hang his knife on a peg he always used. He looked at Abigail the way a man looks at a map he's already walked. You're safe here from them. I'm not safe from you. You are under my rules. That is a different kind of safety. Taron's mouth tilted in a wry shape as if a private joke had almost been told. He glanced at Raphael. The North Ridge will hold until dawn. Edrin will want to sit it. He can want it. He'll get the South line. The North is mine. Abigail heard the other name and let it scrape her nerves raw. Another wolf. Another wall. Another pair of eyes. Raphael turned to Leora. Water. Bread. The stew if it's ready. And a room for the guest. Leora's gaze jumped to Abigail again, safer here than out there. The whisper came before she could stop it. She flushed as if she'd stepped out of turn, then bobbed and hurried off. Abigail's breath dragged across the raw place inside her chest. The word safer clung like burrs. Raphael lifted his hand and set 2 fingers against the pulse at her wrist, counting, reading, owning. You'll learn the shape of my patience, Abigail Veyra, and you'll learn the shape of mine. He smiled, slow and small and full of trouble. We're going to enjoy teaching each other. The lodge breathed around her, wood ticking as it settled, the hearth murmuring low in the stone. Warmth slipped under Abigail's skin and woke the sting along the scratches on her arms. The room stretched long beneath dark rafters, windows set deep like cupped embers. Pelts over benches looked used, not displayed. The big table carried the history of knives and winters. Smoke, soap, iron, and the faint musk of wolves lived in the air as if they paid rent. Raphael's presence turned the room into a different landscape. He didn't crowd. He didn't have to. He crossed the space with that balanced stride of someone who never wondered whether the ground would hold him. Taron stayed near the door, quiet, measuring corners and escape lines the way a tracker measures crossings. Abigail hovered a step inside the threshold, pulse still drumming along the inside of her wrist where his fingers had counted it. Leora hurried in with a wooden tray, urgency brightening her eyes. A clay mug steamed. Black bread waited beside a crock of softened butter, and a bowl breathed beef and thyme, and an afternoon's patience. Water first. The girl slid the cool mug into Abigail's hands and tipped her chin toward a bench by the hearth. Sit before your legs forget what they're for. Standing felt safer than kindness, but the water drew her mouth to the cup. It soothed dry ridges in her throat. and turned the act of swallowing into something that worked again. She drank to the bottom. Leora refilled it without being asked. A heavy boot thumped once on the porch, a warning instead of a knock. The door opened on a man built for the lower slopes, shoulders broad, hair cut short to get out of his way, a pale scar striking down one cheek. His gaze landed on Raphael first, then Taron, then Abigail, and hardened around her with the tidy resolve of frost. "You brought trouble home. Edrin." Raphael's voice moved like wind through grass, quiet until everything bent for it. That trouble behind her eyes remembers names. Edrin shut the door and came a step closer, his own wolf bright in his face. "If she runs, it'll be because we smelled like mercy. If she runs, she'll be found and brought back." Raphael didn't glance away from Abigail when he answered, making the words about her as much as duty. "Not by you. By me." Edrin's gaze flicked to the drying smear at her collarbone, the dirt grinding into her knees, the raw places on her palms, the way she refused the bench. His jaw worked. "Stay off the north path." The warning came like a thrown rope. Winter broke it and spring didn't fix it. The drop lies. Abigail finished the water because looking at the cup felt easier than looking at Edrin's instinct to treat her like a knife pointed at his alpha. Leora set the tray on the table and lifted the stew's lid. "Eat before hunger decides you for you." The girl cut her eyes toward the corridor. "I made up the east guest room. The stove there holds heat. The other one thinks it's a chimney." Taron tore bread in quiet halves and watched the windows. "South line is soft. I'll wake Wren. If Silverpine breathes near the birches, the floorboards will tell us. Wake him. Watch with him." Raphael's hand traced a short line through the air, an order with no weight and all the weight he needed. "Edrin, take the lower slope. If they climb in the dark again, let the rocks teach discipline instead of my hearth." Edrin's mouth twitched and remembered restraint. 2 fingers touched the scar. Then he slipped back into the cold. The door closed with a sound like a decision becoming structure. Raphael stepped close until heat brushed her cooled skin, and the smell she didn't want to breathe became the air she couldn't avoid. He took the empty mug from her hands, set it aside, and lifted the bowl Leora offered. When she didn't take it, one brow lifted a fraction. "You won't climb my stairs on pride alone, and you think I'm going to climb your stairs, and you're going to learn them by heart." Hunger made its own argument. The first spoonful settled like truce. The second reminded her she hadn't eaten since dusk yesterday. Half an apple and determination. She kept her eyes on the fire. She refused him the weakness of watching her eat. Taron drifted to the corridor and listened to the breathing of the house and the mountain at once. His presence steadied the room. He glanced at Abigail without malice, then at Raphael. "You want a body here too?" "No." Raphael kept the sound of himself close, letting it press only the space between them. "She won't run while the room smells like food and heat. She'll think about it later, when the planks breathe even, and my steps pass her door." He let that fall where she could hear it. "Then she'll decide whether fear tastes better than rest." Taron's mouth twitched like agreement and vanished into the corridor. Abigail emptied the bowl and hated being grateful. Leora slipped in to take it and set a folded cloth on the table, then unscrewed a small jar. Sharp green rose from it. "Yarrow and comfrey." The girl held it up, hands sure. "Otherwise your sleeves will keep arguing with your skin." Abigail reached. Raphael had already taken the jar. He warmed the salve with his fingers, then touched the cut along her forearm. Cool slid into heat. He worked with a careful efficiency that didn't match the stories about him, smoothing a thin shine that smelled like summer pressed into an old wound. "Don't touch them every time you think about running. I don't think about running, I think about leaving you with a lesson. Teach me." His wrist brushed her skin, the contact was light. Deliberate anyway. Her wolf paced behind her ribs, claws just catching bone. Move him back. Her body didn't. Leora found a fresh stack of cloths that didn't need finding, cheeks warmed by something the fire couldn't claim. The girl cleared her throat softly. "There's hot water in the washing room. The copper basin holds it if you don't waste time arguing with yourself about deserving it. There's a shirt and leggings if you don't want to sleep in running clothes. Abigail watched Raphael's thumb smooth salve along another shallow cut. Leora's kindness tested thin places inside her. She couldn't afford to let them split. Thank you. You'll need cloth for the ankle. Raphael's gaze fell to the swelling she'd dismissed since the slope. He knew where her pain lived because he'd felt it change her stride and watched stubbornness lengthen to cover it. It's fine, it's not. His hand closed around the joint with a healer's confidence and a predator's ownership. He flexed gently. Pain bit and made her breath catch. His eyes lifted on the hitch and set it in memory. Leora passed a strip. He wrapped the ankle with practiced motions that spoke of warriors, winters, and people he'd refused to let limp. You can say thank you without deleting your fury. You talk like fury belongs on a ledger, and it does. It keeps you standing when softness wants to undo you. He tied the wrap and set it with the heel of his hand. And I prefer you standing. Prefer. The word lodged and warmed in ways she didn't give permission to. Taron slipped back in, damp at the edges. Wren's up. South line will hold. Sounds carrying east. We'll hear before we see. Edrin hung a bell on the lower birch. He wants it to be right tonight. He usually is. Raphael dipped his head. Sleep 2 hours, change with him. Touch my door if anything smells like a decision. Taron flicked a glance at Abigail, then away. East room. He tipped his chin down the corridor. The other stove sulks. Leora lifted the tray and vanished with quiet competency. Raphael rose and held out a hand, not because he had to help her, but because offering made his control look like manners. Abigail stood without taking it. Pride worked better now that food sat heavy and honest in her stomach. Raphael matched her pace into the corridor. Dark paneling earlier hands had rubbed to satin, hooks holding cloaks that smelled like wet weather and work, doors spaced even with latches polished by use. The boards underfoot gave small sounds if you listened for them. He and the house both listened. She heard enough to know the house would tell him where she went, even if she figured out how to walk without making noise. He stopped at the second door on the right and pushed it open. The room was bigger than she'd expected. A narrow stove tucked against one wall held a banked heat. The bed sat clean and layered. A small table kept a candle. A blue striking stone. A folded stack of clothing. A basin and pitcher waited on a stand near a window that framed darkness falling into darker trees. The latch on the window would lift. The drop beyond it would not forgive. Raphael stood in the threshold, palm on the frame, like he was measuring how much space belonged to him, even when he didn't cross it. He nudged the damper. The stove breathed out. The air softened. This door doesn't lock. Truly generous. It doesn't need to. His gaze crossed the room, the window, the angle of stone outside, then returned to her. My attention works better than iron. Her wolf rumbled, not consent and not quite refusal. The sound trembled along her nerves and set her jaw. You stand outside doors for entertainment. I stand outside yours because your presence invents new corridors, and I prefer to know where they lead. Arrogance should have made the room smaller. Somehow it fit. Leora slipped past with towels and a small cake of soap that smelled faintly of lavender and ash. I'll bring tea, if I may. You may. The washroom opened off the main room. Copper basin, folded cloths, a little vial of oil. Leora lowered her voice as if speaking to the pipes. If the water hesitates, tap the pipe twice. It remembers what it is when reminded. Abigail's mouth found half a smile. She shut the washroom door for now. Walking in while Raphael filled the doorway felt like an invitation she wasn't giving. He didn't leave. He watched her instead, head angled. Attention reading the way she held weight, the way she guarded heat. When he spoke, it sounded like words he'd made earlier and kept warm until they could do the most work. You'll sleep, you'll wake to the way my house holds you. In the morning, you'll tell me what you think happened to your beta. Not to convince me, to teach me the detail of your grief. Her hand stayed loose, her voice came low, not as even as she wanted. You already decided what I am. I decided what I'll make of what you are, and you don't get to make me. I'll try until you think it was your idea. Footsteps moved along the corridor, a weight the house knew. Edrin's shadow crossed the slice of light and kept going. He didn't look in. His presence still instructed. I'll make the tea. Leora's voice broke the tension with human mercy. Mint. Lemon balm. It tells a heart to stay where it is. Abigail dipped a nod. Raphael stepped aside so the girl could pass. His fingers rasped the doorframe as he moved. That small sound wrote promise onto the wood. He set a bundle on the table by the bed. A knit sweater softened by years. Wool socks. You'll be warmer if you let yourself. You plan for everything, and I plan for the ways people surprise themselves. He stood a breath longer than necessary, and let the air between them thicken just enough for her to catalog every place her body wanted to lean, and every place it wanted to harden. The beast inside him pressed its head into his ribs, patient, relentless. Touch her mouth, mark her mind, make the choice for her. Later. You starve yourself to sharpen the flavor. I have no use for easy. He stepped back into the corridor, offering space the way a hand offers a leash. The door rested open, a palm's width. The house listened. Abigail poured water into the basin and watched the steam lift. Blood left her wrists and whirlpooled into clean. Dirt thinned from the scratches. The soap lifted the memory of the wilds from her skin. When she pulled on the shirt and leggings, the fabric met her like it belonged to someone who hadn't been hunted. The sweater caught warmth and held it. The socks made the floor kind. The feeling was unreasonable. She fought it anyway. She came out to find Leora setting tea down by the candle. The girl poured a small cup, mint and lemon balm, for hearts that try to climb out and run around without permission. Leora's glance touched the door and returned. If you need to leave the room, you can. No one will stop you in the hall. The steps to the porch are 3 turns left. The slope doesn't tell the truth in the dark. You're warning me not to run. I'm reminding you that leaving tonight is picking a story you don't need. Leora's fingers tugged her apron once, then let go. I'm not loud brave. I'm blanket brave. Food brave. Quiet brave. I can do that for you. It helps. The girl's smile eased something wound too tight. Then she dipped and left, closing the door to that measured gap. Abigail drank. The tea didn't erase wariness. It made wariness hers instead of its own creature. The candle leaned and steadied. The stove sighed. She crossed to the window and looked down into layered dark. The outside felt indifferent and honest. The room felt small and full of judgments she could live with. Rest while you can. Her wolf leaned against her heart from the inside. We choose the direction when we run. She touched the knit ribs of the sweater with her thumb, as if confirming texture could anchor choice. The latch on the door lifted without protest. She opened the door and looked out. The corridor carried the soft, constant breath of a house that learned its people. She stepped into the hall. Bare toes found the cool plank. To the left, a small window framed a slice of black and a smear of stars. To the right, the corridor bent and continued in a spine of doors. She turned left, stood at the little window, and listened. Old timber, far water, a voice somewhere below. Not words, just the fact of men sharing a space without waste. She turned back and almost walked into Taron, and he didn't start. He didn't apologize. He held stillness like a skill. You need anything? No. Good. He cocked his head, listening through the boards to a faint metal ring as if the bell on the lower birch had shifted against bark. If you catch the itch to explore, save it for daylight. Edrin sets traps in his head when he lifts them from the ground, and he thinks I'll run. He thinks everything runs. It keeps him honest. Taron's eyes slid to the open palm's width, then to the sweater, socks, stove. You're not wrong to hate this. You're not wrong to use it. He eased back a step and gave her the hall like a gift he didn't need. Door stays how you leave it. We're not afraid of air. She nodded once. He flowed away toward the stairs like water deciding a path. Back inside, her fingers rested on the latch. She didn't push it down. The bed looked like it would do what beds were supposed to do. She lay on top of the blankets because going under them felt like agreeing. Sleep hovered, distant enough to deny, close enough to smell. It came not as a fall, but like a body remembering for a short time how to be a place and not a weapon. She surfaced for no reason she could name. The candle had burned low to a small insistence. The stove breathed slowly. Abigail. Her name touched the inside of her skull as if someone traced it on fogged glass. Her mouth almost answered before sense caught it and held it shut. Be quiet. Her wolf didn't raise its voice. Listen. Footsteps moved along the corridor, not heavy, not stealth. The rhythm of a man who didn't ask forgiveness for existing in his own house. They passed her door and paused at that knot in the wood where the grain had learned his hand. Then they moved on, turned at the corner and faded as if patience had mapped itself and found every edge holding. She lay back, eyes burning from how long she'd kept them open. The echo of those steps lived under her skin. She swallowed and closed her eyes again. This time sleep shaped itself like something that would one day burn and never quite heal, and like hands that would pretend not to ask while already learning the map of her answer. Morning arrived as a warm breath through the stove, a patient tick in the wood, the house humming the low notes of its own body. Abigail lay awake and watched the door she had left open a palm's width. Draft on her cheek, quiet, widening, then narrowing. Footsteps moved along the corridor and paused in that exact place again, the way a hand rests over a throat to feel the beat it now knows by heart. Ownership pretending to be patience, her wolf noted. He's counting that rhythm like it belongs to him. The steps went on. The hush stitched itself shut. She rolled out of bed, testing the ankle. Stiff, tender, trustworthy if she treated it like a wary friend. The sweater held last night's heat at her collarbones. Cold tingled through her toes as they touched the boards. She washed quickly at the basin, lavender and ash in the steam, then pressed the towel to each cheek until the inner thrum steadied. She slipped into the hallway and learned the floor's voice, which boards sighed and which kept secrets. A small window at the far end offered spruce tips and a winter sky the color of tin. Outside, a boot crossed the porch, once solid and certain and faded. Edrin's weight carried a message the house respected. A stillness pooled at the bend. Taron stood there, hands tucked, gaze calm enough to quiet a room. He didn't stare. He simply noticed her, the way weather notices a ridge. Morning. She angled a nod. Morning. His attention flicked to her ankle and then to the run of floor between them, measuring distance without moving closer. He let the house do the work of saying they were both awake and alive and not interested in wasting words on anything else. Leora stepped out of the kitchen with a tray and the look of someone who had studied courage late and passed. Steam lifted from the teapot and made soft beads on her lashes. Warm bread scented the air like a promise. You beat me to it. Good. Tea first, then something with butter so the tea doesn't feel lonely. The lower slope is slick today. If the north path smiles at you, don't trust it. It smiles the way lakes do when they're thin enough to break. I've no plans to learn humility from a fall before breakfast, and it prefers the brave ones. Leora's mouth tilted and then straightened. There's honey. The East Garden keeps bees when the world remembers how. Abigail followed her to the kitchen because tea made sense when nothing else did. The room was all low windows and a table scarred by seasons. Light came in square and modest, and glanced off jars lined in tidy rows. A knife rested mid-task, as if kitchen tools worked more than they waited to work. Raphael stood near the hearth with a mug, his patience installed where other men might set a chair. Smoke and pine clung to him. That clean mineral cool threaded the scent like stone washed by rain. He didn't turn. The space around him did, the way water reorders itself around something that belongs to the riverbed. He set the mug down. His gaze clicked to her and counted what it needed to count. Posture, the stubborn line of her mouth, the color that meant her night had ended with her pulse moving where it should. Sleep. Enough. A small, satisfied nod, nothing to boast about. He motioned toward the table and closed distance without touching, scent drawing over the room's gentler smells and reminding every object who owned the air. 3 rules, Abigail. She wrapped both hands around the cup Leora poured. Mint breathed up into her face, warm and green. She didn't ask. She let the rules come like weather across a field. You may roam inside and within sight of the porch. He let the first land with the weight of a stone that had no intention of moving. You do not cross the birch line. If you need anything, you ask me, not the others. The cup warmed her palms. She took a careful sip, not because she was calm, but because she refused to waste movement. Those aren't about safety, that's a leash. Leashes have buckles. His knuckle tapped the table once, a metronome's single click. You have the shape of one without the bite. For now. Her wolf ruffled its fur and then smoothed it, not from submission, from accuracy. He names the collar and still expects thanks. Leora slid a plate over, butter softening at the edges. The girl's eyes went from Abigail to Raphael to the window with the disciplined curiosity of someone who learned to love without leaving fingerprints. Taron came in, shoulders wearing damp cloud. Ridge will hunch by afternoon. He dropped a small leather pouch, fingers easy, 2 trails salted. Let them think we doubled at the creek. Raphael looked past Abigail as if the land had pushed its way inside to report. Not yet. Right time. Abigail turned the knife slowly in the butter and watched the curl fall and slump. Right time for what? Raphael met her eyes with that slight tilt wolves use to listen for what the mouth won't say. Breakfast first, and that isn't an answer. You'll prefer mine when your hand stops shaking. He glanced at her knuckles. Sit. She stayed standing. Obeying would feel too good, and she wasn't that foolish. She bit into warm bread and let the simplicity insist on its own power. A tread stopped on the porch where window light made a pale square. Edrin's voice came through the wood like a guideline carved into bark. She's not a guest. Taron's shoulder moved half an inch, acknowledgement without agreement. She's not a prisoner. Raphael didn't glance toward the door. The room understood him without the theater. She is under my roof. The roof knows what that means. Edrin's steps continued, heavy and familiar, and the house put the moment away for later. Abigail tore off a second piece of bread to keep her tongue from useless sharpness. Butter and heat made a small truth in her mouth. She hated needing it, and needed it anyway. Raphael's hand hovered toward her wrist, not quite on her, waiting for refusal. She didn't offer it. His fingers rested lightly in the hollow where pulse lives, and watched her face while he counted beats he'd already paused for in the dark. The press wasn't possessive, it didn't need to be. Care dressed in ownership, her wolf said, or ownership dressed in care. Change the coat and it's the same man. He lifted his hand and the space he left behind felt used. Smoke, stone, pine that cut clean as winter air in her throat. Leora put a small bowl of washing water by the window, folded cloth tucked beside it. Invitation, not order. Abigail dipped a corner and pressed it to the inside of each wrist. Heat bled into the cloth. Her skin answered with relief. It refused to name aloud. Taron stood at the window with 2 fingers resting lightly on the sill, as if speaking to the glass. The creek is arguing with the rocks. If you stand close to listen, you won't hear someone arrive behind you. A warning wrapped in a simple image, her wolf approved. If I go, it will be because I want the argument. Raphael's gaze tracked the beads of water along her skin like they were a language he spoke. Inside him, something old and patient lifted its head. Claim her when she leans. Make her think gravity was invented by your hands. Not yet. It waited, teeth quiet, tail slow. Warmth made her drowsy and restless at once. She walked the short run of the back hall for no reason she could defend and for every reason she needed. Shelves to the left. Jars labeled in a neat hand. To the right, a deeper set door with iron and old wood and the history of hands that had wiped sweat on their pants before lifting the latch and then thought better of it. Something scratched inside, not frantic, practiced, a cat with patience and claws. Her wolf went still, listening with its whole body. That knows you, or it will. Her palm found the latch. Metal cold through skin. It would rise with a firm lift. It wanted to be lifted. She felt the invitation without the courtesy. Not a door you open if you value your life. His voice moved the air at her ear. Heat slid over the fine hairs there. She didn't startle. She let go of the latch and put her palm against the wood as if the answer were in the grain. You keep a monster in your house, I keep a threshold. His chest nearly skimmed her back as he reached above for a jar. The narrow hall made everything an argument she could not win with distance. The jar scraped softly as he pulled it forward. He paused just long enough to count her breaths again. You like thresholds, they make you feel clean. He set the jar where she could see it. He didn't step back. The thing behind the door scratched once more, as if it, too, appreciated timing. You hear it, Abigail. Hard not to when it announces itself. No, you hear it. His mouth made a fractional movement and let it go. Leave this shut. Give me a reason I want. Because I told you. Because what's inside won't care about your intent when your hand moves the latch. Because I prefer your skin unbroken. His fingers found the inside edge of her wrist and ghosted her hand away. Not command. Direction. Her pulse leaped, then steadied, as if it kept trying to decide whose rhythm to follow. Another lives here, her wolf breathed, not him, not his. The boards know its step. He stepped past with the jar. Even the vacuum of space left behind felt like a hand on her spine. She stood for 5 slow counts with her palm flattening the door's cool body, then let it hold its secrets a while longer. Back in the kitchen, Leora offered a warmed towel from near the hearth. If you want the east porch for air, I can fetch a blanket. The north path lies on days like this. The wind talks you into trust and then forgets you when you fall. You're kind enough for people who don't deserve it. Kindness is the only thing I can afford too much of. Leora glanced toward the hall and then away. You may borrow it. Taron pressed 2 knuckles to the window frame and read the sky. Gray thickening. By afternoon, she'll lean hard enough to pry stones loose. We'll keep her off the ridge. Keep who off what? You. Off everything that wears a freedom face and ends in rock. You're certain I can't tell, and you will after you almost don't. He pulled her chair with 2 fingers again. Nothing but patience in the gesture. Sit. She held the chair back a breath longer, then let practicality win. Leora slid fresh bread into the space where stubbornness had been. Abigail ate because her legs needed something better than defiance to stand on later. Raphael leaned a hip near. The fabric at his thigh nearly touched her sleeve. He studied her as a craftsman studies grain, looking for where the wood wanted to split and where it wanted to hold. You may go anywhere inside. You may stand on the east and south porches and breathe without thinking about me. If your foot crosses the birch line, we will have a different conversation. I'm not yours, and you are under my roof, under my eye, and under my patience. That gives everything here a shape, whether you appreciate it or not. He stacks words like stones, her wolf muttered. He's building a wall and leaving a doorway shaped like you. She put the knife down too gently for anyone to accuse her of throwing it. You paint control as safety because it lets you look noble in your own story. You use defiance as a coat because you're cold. He leaned a fraction nearer, and that tiny shift opened something in her chest she didn't intend to open. I will be the one you ask for what you need. That is not up for debate. What qualifies as need? His gaze dropped to the pulse at her throat and returned to her eyes, an answer with no apology. You'll know. Taron coughed into his fist, then angled for the hall. I'll check the south post before she leans. The porch creaked. Edrin stopped in the threshold, broad shoulders filling the frame, his worry gone pragmatic. Lower trail has new sign. Not hoof, not ours. Light prints, wrong pattern for deer. It cut side to side like it wants us tired. Taron passed him, a clean slipstream. Edrin stayed planted. You're letting her walk your halls, and Abigail raised the cup. You can address me. He measured her in a glance, not to belittle, to categorize. You don't know who else breathes under this roof. Then help me learn something that will keep me alive. Don't mistake gentleness for weakness. He looked to Raphael. The talk that followed needed no words and ended with Edrin stepping back into his slope and his bell and his bone-deep preference for being right. The room settled. Leora tucked cloths away as if saving small mercies for later. Taron's shadow slid across the window like competence made visible. Raphael's attention pressed warm and steady, turning patience into weight. I want to see the birch line, and you will, not today. Because you'll be busy counting my breaths, because the ridge will test you and I am not interested in broken compromises. He raised his hand and paused just shy of the underside of her jaw. How's the ankle? Tender when I let it be, let me see. No. He held the pause longer than before. Then he let his hand fall, the lesson of absence slipping under her skin more cleanly than touch. He took up his mug, unbothered. Walk the house, Abigail, use the porch. Ask me for what you need. Keep your hand off that door. She rose before sitting made her forget that standing was a choice. Leora's glance held steady kindness, the sort that didn't scrape pride raw. The back hall tugged her again and she let it. Shelves, jars, heavy door. Those histories. The scratch came, faint and precise. The impulse to test the latch bit at her fingers. What are you? She breathed to the wood. It hears you, her wolf said quietly. It will remember the sound of your hand. Raphael didn't speak this time. He approached and the boards underfoot told her where he stopped without a word passing his mouth. Distance measured itself like thread between them. That door is an answer to a question you aren't ready to form. Move away from me. He obeyed the letter of it and ignored the spirit. He stepped past, close enough that his sleeve stole the air near her shoulder, then took the jar he didn't need. Even that small robbery of space left her more aware of him than of the door. She returned to the kitchen on stubborn legs and took a slice of apple from the small bowl Leora had set out. Crisp sweetness broke the bitterness on her tongue. The window glazed slightly with steam. Snow hung undecided beyond the glass. If you want air, the east porch is kinder. Leora kept her voice low. The north path likes to tell lies when wind's in a mood. You never run out of warnings. I want you to have enough of me to make your own choices and still have skin afterward. Abigail managed a small smile that wasn't much and still felt like something. She glanced toward the door. Raphael watched the way she looked at exits and marked it down like a number in a ledger he didn't intend to share. Come here, Abigail. She walked because she would do it on her own feet or not at all. He lifted his hand and offered his palm between them, a space she could choose to fill. She didn't. He raised 2 fingers toward her jaw and waited 1 heartbeat, then another, making sure the animal in her would not bolt. He touched the soft place under her ear with the lightest pressure, and let his eyes rest nowhere else. Heat moved along her throat like a secret. Her pulse did what pulses do when bodies tell truths they haven't decided to speak. He stood very still. Predator pleased. Not triumph, exactly. Recognition. The line between power and promise hung suspended, balanced on that tiny contact. Enough. He let the contact go gently, leaving the outline of it behind as if he'd painted it there in water, and told it to dry slowly. My rules stand. Walk where I permit. Breathe where I choose. Ask me for what you will not admit to wanting. Leave the door shut. From the back hall the scratch came one more time, precise and patient. Leora turned a cup upright and found something to polish that didn't need polishing. Taron's figure moved past the window again, the kind of competence that makes a place real. Edrin's step took the porch's corner like he'd memorized how to reassure wood with weight. Abigail lifted her chin and let fury and the thing that wasn't fury share her mouth. I'll take your roof and burn your heat and use your bread and your rules for as long as it suits me. But I am not yours. His eyes warmed, not with mercy, with certainty. Not yet. Her wolf flared, every hair up. Be careful. He wants to turn the lesson into a vow you think you invented. She turned from him and pushed the sash door. Cold walked in and touched her face with clean hands. The porch boards steadied her. The view cut her lungs open and filled them. Birches striped the slope below, a pale line through darker green. Beyond them, the wilds stacked shadows into a wall. Edrin stood at the far rail, hands planted, gaze combing the seam where forest met rock. He didn't look over. If you fall off this side in the dark, I'll be the one climbing down to gather what's left. I prefer my back uncracked. Then don't let me fall. Keep your feet where the planks are and we'll both get what we want. Raphael leaned in the doorway and didn't interrupt. His nearness changed the temperature of the space. The quiet built a structure out of breath and gaze. You didn't thank me for leaving the door unlocked, and I don't thank builders for a door that works, and my rules. Those I'll collect in other currencies, and arrogant and accurate. She looked at the birch line until the pale trunks blurred. Wind shook a small shiver through them, silver flashing along their length. The locked door behind her felt like a heartbeat at the far end of an artery. The house breathed. The mountain waited. Her fingers, of their own will, found the spot along her jaw where his touch had settled and lingered as if heat could be measured by memory. Not yet, her wolf whispered. Learn the fence, learn the hand, then decide who owns the gate. Afternoon slumped early, the sky lowering until the windows looked like wet slate. The air carried a metallic taste, like the mountain had been grinding its teeth since morning. Abigail stood on the east porch with her palms flat to the rail and let the wind test her. It pushed once, curious, then shouldered in harder, a body discovering its own weight. The birches below flashed pale up their trunks, the forest turning itself into a single warning. Inside, the house answered with the quiet of preparation. Leora moved between pantry and hearth, laying out candles and flint, checking the kettle, tucking extra wool on the long bench as if warmth could be staged. Taron came through the front, with his hood dripping and that unbothered patience that made wet look deliberate. Edrin crossed the porch and paused to peer into the trees as if he could tuck the whole ridgeline under the scar on his cheek and keep it there. Abigail slipped back in and pulled the door to. Heat held the room like a hand. Raphael stood by the hearth with one palm flat on the mantel, fingers spread, listening to the bones of his house. Smoke wrapped him. That mineral, cool, she'd begun to think of as his shadow, edged the scent. Taron shook water from his sleeves, winds making the north trail a liar. Bell will sing if anyone tests it. South path holds, for now. Edrin leaned into the doorframe, a wall inside a wall. Lower birch has teeth tonight. I'll sit it. If they come, they'll come under it, mouths open, trying to look less tired than they are. Raphael's gaze cut briefly to the window, then returned to Abigail like the storm had been punctuation, and now the sentence had found its subject again. He crossed to the stairs without speaking, and looked at her ankle. Not the linen, the way her weight avoided it. Rest while the mountain throws its tantrum. The stairwell rose into a bend where the wall narrowed, a throat made of wood and shadow. She put her foot on the first step. The second creaked, honest and old. Wind shouldered the sash at the landing until the latch complained. Air punched down the well of the stairs and found the back of her knees. Her boot slid on the polished edge of the step. He was there before her breath finished leaving. A palm under her knee turned the slip into stillness. His other hand braced the wall by her head, fingers wide, each callus reading the grain. Their bodies aligned the way water discovers the right shape for a glass. Heat rolled off him. Storm air met his warmth and turned it electric. You tremble more from me than from the wind, and do you plan to hold me up or hold me here, both? He didn't rush to set her upright. He didn't pretend kindness was the point. He existed in the space until her muscles learned his weight and stopped flinching. The house groaned under a stronger gust. His palm firmed at her knee and then eased. Not release reminder. His gaze watched her mouth like it held the truth of her when the weather made ears useless. Her wolf hummed low, treacherous and alert. Danger and the kind that turns blood toward heat instead of away. She breathed iron and pine and refused to give him words. He took that as agreement, or victory, or both. He guided her down a step, slow, then another, his hand sliding from her knee to the rail as if the wood had just earned his confidence. When they reached the main floor, he didn't let space rush in. He kept the corridor narrow with presence alone until the memory of the stairwell settled between her shoulder blades. By the fire he crouched, and the old floor accepted his knees without complaint. He unwound the bandage with care that had nothing to do with softness. Linen slipped cool under his fingers. Air found the skin beneath and prickled. He checked swelling with his thumb until pain bloomed behind her eyes, then eased as if he had learned enough. "You walk too much, and I stood too much rather than crawl for your benefit." He almost smiled. Almost. He wrapped the joint again, slower this time, precise as a map drawn for bad weather. When he finished, he pressed once, sealing. He lifted a sweater from the bench and set it across her shoulders. The wool trapped heat immediately, and his scent thinned into the knit like smoke into a scarf. "You keep putting your scent on me, I keep you warm. If the result offends, take it off." She didn't. He watched that decision happen, quiet as a ledger. His thumb found the hollow at her throat and rested there with pressure so light it felt like listening more than touch. The beat steadied under him. The move looked clinical. It wasn't. "Do you do that with all your strays, and only with the ones who pretend they don't need it?" She wanted to bite him, she wanted to lean, she did neither. Her wolf exhaled a sound near laughter. He's taking inventory and calling it care. He sat angled so a knee might brush hers if the room breathed too hard. It did. He left his wrist near hers without contact, and that space felt occupied anyway. His voice dropped into the kind of quiet that makes the body answer even when the mouth plans to keep secrets. "Tell me about your work. The herbs first, how you choose. When you refuse, you think I'll forget the rest if we start with plants. You trust what you do with your hands more than what anyone tells your mouth to say. Start there." The storm trimmed her choices to ground she could stand on. She looked to the jars Leora kept in reach of a useful life. Feverfew for heat under the skin that won't break. Willow when pain argues and wins. Yarrow when the body needs to remember how to close itself. "How to close and how to keep open," he murmured, reading the memory in the words. "And how to know the difference." She drew a sharp breath. He felt the change. He waited and he died fast. The beta. There wasn't time for the body to lie. The cut spoke louder than the mouth. The way the blood moved. The smell of it. "Wrong wolf," her wolf reminded, the last ragged whisper pressed into her ear. "He told you and left you to pay." Raphael's jaw moved like he tasted a thought. Did he eat or drink anything different that day? He ate where he always ate, with men who always talked too loud. Meat underdone the way he wanted it. He laughed before he fell quiet. He gripped my wrist with more strength than he had left. "You believe he knew who killed him, and I believe he knew it wasn't me." His gaze dropped to the space on the bench between them and came back, the way a wolf looks at a path it intends to take later. "What did you smell besides blood?" "Iron. Bitter on the back of the tongue that wasn't ale. Something old on the cut. Not from the edge. From whatever else that blade had known. So not clean steel. No." "Good." The word clicked like a lock sliding smooth. "I'll have Taron check East traders after the storm. Some pass seats they didn't earn by passing blades they shouldn't hold." Good landed wrong in her ribs. She reached for an apple, held it, set it back without biting. Iron still lived under her tongue and begged to be proved. "You kept your hand steady while he died," Raphael observed. Voice of a man cataloging tools. "You keep them steady now because you hate that steadiness is what people will mistake for guilt. You think you can read me in an afternoon, and I recognize a wolf who hates being wrong more than being caught." Wind slammed the shutters and made the hearth flame wobble. Shadows climbed the rafters and clung. Leora's head lifted, listening to nails in the walls. Taron moved past the window, a dark blur, and the door opened to let in a wedge of cold and his outline. Silverpine pushed scouts to Marrow Creek. Good. Keep them hungry and far. And her. Here. Until the right time. Taron nodded and vanished into weather. Abigail's wolf bristled until fine hairs lifted along her arms. Right time for what? Raphael's attention returned steady, not softened by the sting of that fragment. He leaned an inch closer, small and deliberate enough to feel like a line cut into wood. Right time for you to stop lying to yourself. You hear yourself, I'm not auditioning for a part I won't keep, and Dark pressed heavier. Edrin's step crossed the porch hard enough to warn the floor. Leora set a row of candles along the mantel and struck flint. The first strike flared and died. The second caught. She cupped the flame and coaxed it into 3 more. Abigail pushed to stand too fast. The ankle objected with bright, immediate instruction. Raphael's hand found her knee again, and heat wrapped the objection, turning it into order. Do you plan to keep touching me whenever the world invents an excuse? I don't need excuses. His palm stayed. The storm slapped the roof, the shutter rattled its bones. The hearth hissed once and shoved the flame up through smoke like a wolf shouldering out of a river. Leora moved to close inner shutters, but she left the one by the door unlatched in case Taron needed sight more than warmth. Edrin slid in briefly, rimmed by wet, and swept the room with a glance that counted bodies and read readiness. His gaze paused a fraction on Raphael's hand, where it steadied Abigail. You busy? Always. Close the north latch and tell the birch I'm listening. Edrin's nod was a quick clean cut, and he vanished back into weather. Raphael's voice narrowed until it wanted the space between 2 beats more than the room. Your beta's last words. All of them. She didn't want them outside her skull. She gave them anyway because truth rots locked away. Wrong wolf. He had more than a guess. He had certainty and only 1 breath left to shape it. Good. Softer this time. Almost approval. We'll use his certainty. And yours. Lightning sheeted white across the windows and emptied the world into outlines. Dark fell back thicker. In that blind second, his breath was near, his mouth a shade from hers. Instinct took her hands to his chest. Heat. Breath. The steady engine of his lungs, the smear of wet across his collar from the weather. The room narrowed to the seam where her fingers met him. He didn't close the last inch. He held the distance like a wire, letting her decide if the air between belonged to her or to him. Do you plan to hold me up or hold me here? Both. That single word packed the dark so full of promise she swore she could taste it. Her wolf made a sound between warning and want. Ridge bell. Edrin's voice cut in from the doorway, low and certain. A heartbeat later, the bell itself lifted its thin cry from the slope, plucked once, twice, telling anyone with ears that something heavier than wind had stepped where it shouldn't. Raphael left her in a neglect that stung and stood in one clean motion. The room found his outline first, then his orders. Taron, north turn. Keep them hungry. Edrin, lower birch. 3 breaths of silence, then light. Leora, shutters and pantry. He took the long knife from its peg. Metal brushed wood with a small, satisfied sound. Leora moved without fuss, hooking shutters, checking the row of jars nearest reach. Edrin disappeared and the porch caught his steps, then let them go. Abigail stayed very still while the room rearranged itself around his absence. The sweater he had put on her held heat like a held breath. Her palms tingled where they'd braced against his chest, a touch that hadn't happened and still warmed her skin. The door closed against the wind. His voice came back through the wood from the porch, a low line in rain. Taron, let the wind work for you. If they try the north bend, the mountain will teach them first. And her? Here, where she chooses to be useful. Taron didn't waste agreement on words. The door thudded softly and the hinge decided to behave. Leora returned to the bench and set a cup in Abigail's hands. Mint again, with something darker beneath. She didn't offer consolation. She stood close enough to be leaned on without requiring it. He moves like the house moves, Abigail muttered into steam. Everything shifts around him and then you look up and realize you shifted too. That's a good roof's trick. Leora tucked wool closer about her shoulders. You stop counting the times it keeps you dry and start believing the weather owes you. The door opened a hand's width. Taron's voice came through without his body. 2 on the ridge. Hungry. The wind makes fools of them. Let it, Raphael answered from outside. If they commit to the bend, they'll learn. And the other sign. Later. The door closed. The bell stopped. Not because danger was gone, because someone quieted it with a palm and choice. The hearth breathed deeper. Flames rose and settled like a body making itself heavy on purpose. Raphael came back in with a precise slice of wet air. He pushed the door with his back and peeled water from his wrist with 2 fingers. He didn't drip. The floor seemed to refuse to accept it. He set the knife on its peg and rolled his shoulders, not in pain, in readiness. Steam lifted from his clothes and sharpened his scent before the heat ate it and made it familiar again. They'll try lower by habit, Edrin called from beyond the door, voice hard and almost pleased. I would. Let them. Taron will make it expensive. Raphael stopped in front of her and set his knuckles lightly on the bench by her hip. Pressure that wasn't possessive. A statement. The bench was under his hands, and everything on it by extension. Do you want to hear what I heard, if it's truth and not riddle? Silverpine is hungry and tired, which makes men inventive and stupid at the same time. Something else moved the dead needles in the lower hollow before them. Not deer. Not boar. Not ours. The pattern is wrong. You enjoy being mysterious, I enjoy accuracy. He bent a fraction, bringing his eyes level with hers so she wouldn't have to give him her throat to look. The wrong step doesn't carry weight, like a body that belongs here. It places a foot and takes it back too clean. Forgets to wear dirt. A hunter who doesn't know he's hunting, or one who thinks the ground owes him. The wind changed key, a lower note through rafters. He watched emotion move across her face and back, measured the order it arrived in. He set 2 fingers to the inside of her wrist again, counted 2 beats, lifted his hand, then left it hovering like proof of his own restraint. You almost kissed me. I almost took something you'd pretend was stolen and later tell yourself you gave. Arrogant, accurate. She put her palm on his chest again, not blind this time. Intention steady. Heat met skin as if he'd been built to answer that contact. His wolf lifted its head, pleased and patient. Hold her mouth with your patience, it murmured. Press your want where her hands have already named you. Later. You turn hunger into your favorite tool, the inner voice teased. You sharpen it even while using it. Useful things stay sharp. Her hand stayed longer than she allowed for other men. The realization made anger stand aside for the feeling beneath it. She took her palm back as if reclaiming a knife too comfortable in someone else's grip. The place she'd touched still felt warm to her skin, a heat she carried with her when it should have stayed on him. Edrin's boot tapped once on the porch, a note more than a knock. Silence, then the quiet weight of Taron inside the door. North Bend sulked itself out. They'll test the birch trail and go home sore. And the other sign? Old, not scared. Whatever laid it walks this way often. It doesn't guess. Raphael's eyes slid toward the back hall where the heavy door waited and held its breath. The house listened to the storm find a deeper voice. You'll stay where I can find you with my hand when night settles heavy. You don't decide my corners, I decide which corners keep you intact. Leora touched Abigail's shoulder, light and present. I'll bring another candle when the blue one's done. The blue one, the stubborn one. It burns slower and saves a last inch like it knows you'll need it later. Abigail looked at the small candle stained faint blue on the mantel, its flame steadier than its brighter companions. The sight landed like a seed in hard earth. She turned back to Raphael because the only way through the next hour wore his shape. You won't get a confession and you'll give me something better. What choice? He backed away one measured step as if proving that distance existed because he allowed it. Rain rattled a last handful against the shutters, then softened. In the hush that followed, the house breathed out. From the back hall, the heavy door accepted a soft scrape. Not impatient, not pleading. Promise. Abigail lifted the cup. Steam found her lip. The tea tasted of mint disciplined by something darker, a leaf that told the heart to keep its seat. Her wolf settled with its head on its paws. He pulled his mouth back because the bell spoke, not because he wanted to. You did not want him, you did. Both can be true. That is the smart shape of wanting. Raphael's gaze rested on her face as if he read that thought plain. He didn't smile. He made another neat mark in whatever private ledger he kept, the kind that tallied heat and defiance, and all the moments a pulse agreed with him against its owner's will. Morning rinsed the world clean. The storm had walked off toward the far ridges, leaving the lodge bright and cold, the sky scrubbed to a thin blue that made the birches shine like bone. Abigail woke to the stove's low hum and the stubborn blue candle burning down to its last inch. The door still stood open a palm's width, the house telling her nothing had changed, and everything had. Footsteps passed and paused in the exact place they had paused the night before, a stillness so precise she could have set a clock by it if clocks belonged here. Ownership, pretending to be patience. Her wolf muttered, less combative in the clear air, more precise. He likes the ritual more than the view. The steps moved on. She tested her ankle and found it stiff but willing to bargain. The sweater carried smoke and pine at the collar. She washed quickly, breath fogging the small mirror until she drew a line through the blur with a fingertip and erased what the night had written there. A soft knock. Leora leaned in with a tray balanced on one hand. Tea steamed in a cup. A heel of bread gleamed with honey beside thin slices of pear. There's sun, but it only makes the ice clear instead of white. I'm not learning humility twice in 2 days, and I brought a scarf in case your pride wants warmth. Leora set a folded length of wool at the foot of the bed, eyes bright and steady. The kitchen is low on feverfew and willow bark. If you feel like making yourself useful without pretending it's not for you too, the South Grove keeps both through cold. Abigail rubbed the scarf between finger and thumb. The weave was simple and competent, the sort of work that rests a nervous system just by existing. Will you argue if I take the basket? I'll argue only if you go without telling the one who thinks argument is a sport. Leora's glance flicked to the hall and back. He'll put Taron where you can see him and Edrin where you can't. That way everyone's nature gets to do what it does best. Taron stands like water. Edrin stands like rock, and both keep you from testing which wins if you fall. Abigail looped the scarf around her throat, took the bread in her palm, and followed the smell of morning down the corridor. The main room felt newly made, fire low, windows squared with light. Taron stacked split wood beside the hearth, humming a tune so modest it almost kept itself a secret. Raphael leaned his shoulder to a post, arms folded, reading the mountain like a letter he had memorized and still enjoyed. He didn't move when she entered. The room recognized that he had noticed anyway. I hear we are low on feverfew and willow. The South Grove keeps both. Taron nodded once. It does. I'll go. You will, Raphael answered, even as if they had agreed last night while she slept. Within the birch line, with Taron where you can see him and Edrin where you can't. Of course. The shape of safety, he continued, drawing the boundary in the air with his voice. Return before the slope remembers the day has teeth. I'm not your apprentice and you are under my roof. That gives me the luxury of reminding you that bones break when pride picks the root. Her wolf flicked an ear. He means it, he enjoys it. Edrin came in from the porch with a line of wet at his boot edge and readiness tight in his shoulders. He looked at the basket on the bench and then at her, gaze like the flat of a blade, capable and unamused. If you're gathering, you'll keep your hands where I can see them and your feet where the ground remembers them. So no cartwheels across the ravine. No choosing land that enjoys eating wolves. Edrin glanced to Raphael for the objection that didn't come. Satisfied, he pushed the door wide to let cold in like an opinion. They left by the south porch. Air bit clean and honest. A thin crust of snow lined the step's edge, fragile as spun sugar. Sun filled everything until even the darker pines caught light and held it. The birch line rode an elegant pale seam across the nearest slope, trunk scored with narrow script. The grove sat in a shoulder of the hill where wind got tired and let things be. Last year's leaves crisped underfoot. Feverfew pushed small determined green through the litter. Willow hung red and flexible along a wet edge. Abigail knelt, the basket's handle hooked at her elbow, and let practical rhythm bring her back to herself. She twisted willow twigs free. She pinched feverfew carefully, leaving root and future where they belonged. The scent was clean and a little bitter, like a better day arriving in pieces. Taron kept a steady distance, not staring, not inattentive. When she glanced up, he looked at the spaces around her rather than at her, watching for anything the air tried to make invisible. You always watch like that, and it's a useful habit when the mountain has moods. What do you see when you look and it looks back? The fact that it doesn't care I'm looking? Taron's mouth tilted, modest amusement. It keeps me from taking offense on behalf of my own breath. Edrin prowled beyond the grove's edge, footsteps quiet, attention sharp. When his gaze crossed her work, there was less accusation than yesterday, more practical interest. Avoid the white willow if you can. Old trick teaches the wrong lesson about how much pain you can outrun. Red keeps better company with the gut. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank the years I got to keep because an elder liked the way I listened. Raphael arrived without hurry, and still the grove organized itself. He stood at the birch line as if sunlight had remembered him and decided to be generous. He watched Abigail's hands, the way a predator watches a prey animal, do something that is not running. You have enough, we're done. 5 more cuts and 3 and 4. He stepped into the grove and bent to harvest a sprig she had missed, ease in the motion, efficiency without show. He placed it in the basket, and his fingers grazed her knuckles. The contact should have meant nothing. Heat moved through it as if it had been waiting to belong somewhere. Her wolf made a sound that wasn't consent or refusal, a blade leaving its sheath halfway. He's close, and the day is honest. Be smarter than your pulse. They worked without talk for the last cuts. The basket filled with neat green and slender bark. Abigail straightened and rolled her shoulders against a small chill, trying to act larger than it was. We'll take the shorter trail, Raphael said, as if his name on anything could make it short. Taron. Flank. Edrin. Take the line below and ruin the afternoon of anyone who thinks they can stand between my house and what I carry. Edrin's mouth flashed a brief knot smile that still showed teeth. With pleasure. They followed the pale boundary of birch. The air shifted. A sour thread ran through the clean cold. Leather and iron. Silver pine on it. Anger riding the note like frost. Raphael felt it in the same part of himself that notices when a rope tightens. He moved between Abigail and the turn where the scent bled stronger. A tree stood there with a trunk that knew how to outlast weather. He set his forearm near her head and the bark pressed cool through her sweater into her spine. His other hand found the basket and lifted it away. Taron took it without being asked. Confess. Make me. Nothing loud. The wind would have stolen volume for sport. He didn't crowd. He arranged inches so that air had to choose another path. He leaned in, not mouth to mouth. Lower. Slower. His lower face brushed the line of her jaw. Heat moved against the place where pulse meets bone. He rubbed his scent there deliberately, patient as ink being drawn across skin, a claim that wasn't a bite, and still resonated in the thin place where wolf meets woman. Her wolf surged, fury and want braided. Don't let him write your story for you. Also, keep it. She gripped the bark with one hand and ordered her voice into working. You think that means I belong to you. It means I will find you when the world tries to bury you in its noise. He didn't kiss her. The lack of it pressed harder than contact. He lifted away a fraction and read her eyes with the calm of a man who measured patience the way others count coins. A twig cracked to the right. Edrin ghosted up the lower slope and took in the scene with a flat glance that could cut. His hand twitched toward her arm, the reflex to remove a problem directly. Raphael broke the reflex by looking at it. No chains. Edrin tightened his jaw and looked past them toward a hollow where the birches bowed out. Tracks there, if tracks deserved to be called that. They came near and thought better, or something else changed their mind. Taron held the basket with one hand and left the other open, empty by intention. His gaze met Abigail's, a steady door left ajar. The line is there for more than pride. You could tell me what else it's for? I could. Taron's mouth softened at the corners. I'll tell you when the telling won't make you want to prove me wrong. Raphael took the basket back and handed it to Abigail without gripping, laying the handle across her palm as if giving her the choice to curl her fingers or not. When she did, his touch lingered a fraction too brief to count and long enough to keep. They climbed the short trail. Edrin moved ahead with a promise in the set of his shoulders. Taron ranged where shadow returned to itself between trees. Raphael stayed a half pace behind Abby, near enough that the back of her neck knew when the wind changed. On the porch, Leora stacked wood in a clean row and hummed the small tune she used for kettles and nervous dogs. She looked up and saw Abigail's face, saw the heat along the jaw, and glanced at her hands instead, granting privacy without pretending not to understand. Washroom's got fresh water. The blue candle still remembers how to be stubborn, but I brought 2 more in case it wants help. Taron eased the door open and set the basket on the pantry shelf. He slipped away with quiet that preferred competence over conversation. Edrin stopped at the corner of the porch, eyes on the birch seam where boundaries turn into someone else's problem. Don't be clever with the locked door, he tossed inside, not looking. Clever kills more than stupid. Stupid at least announces itself. The lodge took their weight and settled them where it approved. Raphael carried the basket to the table and put it down like an offering in a place the house liked. He drew a knife and shaved willow in thin curls. Unhurried. The rhythm of a man whose hands could turn deadly or useful with equal certainty. Abigail touched the table's edge to steady the part of herself that wanted to go on spinning. The ankle ached honestly. The place along her jaw held warmth that didn't fade, like breath written into skin. She could feel it as she stepped away, as if his nearness had taught her body where to find it even in distance. Her wolf settled with its head up. Keep this, don't spend it fast by speaking first. Raphael's inner wolf paced a tight circle and sat down, satisfaction in its spine. Mark deeper later. Your mercy is the blade. Later, and the beast curled its tail over its paws, patient as hunger made purposeful. Leora brought a damp cloth, set it near Abigail's fingers, and left her hand close enough to be taken. Mint rose from the bowl with a sweeter leaf beneath it. The girl's glance flicked to Raphael, then to Abigail's jaw. I'll steep the willow when you finish shaving it. Bark gives itself to water when it overhears voices it trusts. It trusts you, Raphael said, still shaving, his tone the same as when he commented on weather and weapons. I try to be the sort of person a tree would listen to. Leora pressed the cloth gently into Abigail's palm. You'll want this. Winter light burns without looking like it can. Abigail laid the cool cloth to the place he had scented. Relief moved in and enlarged the room by an inch. When she lowered the cloth, his gaze was on her mouth and then on the line he had drawn. Interested, unapologetic. Taron returned carrying kindling, a wedge of clean light riding his shoulder from the open door. He set the bundle by the stove and gave them both a small nod, acknowledgement of a fact he had no interest in naming. The path below the east turn is clean. Birches are restless and honest. And the other sign, Raphael asked, shaving a longer curl and laying it like a ribbon on the pile. Not deer, not boar, not ours, old and certain, it knows the ground, it doesn't fear it. Edrin's voice came in from the porch, dry as bone. It will fear me if it steps once more on my slope. You'll get your chance. The sun slipped down the far ridge, stealing degrees of warmth with it. Leora lit new candles one by one. The blue candle burned on with stubborn grace, refusing to admit it was nearly done. Evening changed the house in the way evenings do when people are not ready. Shadows sank under the long table, thickened along the far hall. The heavy door at the back sat in its own dim square, iron bands dull in the lowered light. Abigail felt the pull and let herself be drawn, not all the way, just to the top of the back hall. The older timbers breathed cold and gave it back. She stopped in front of the door and listened. The scratch came, not frantic, measured, a thought being sharpened against wood. It hears you, her wolf whispered, utterly still. It liked you before. It likes you more now. She lifted her hand until it hovered over the latch. Cold bled through the air around the metal, a degree thinner than the rest of the hall, as if the door pulled heat and kept it. She pressed her palm to the wood instead and waited for anything her skin could translate. A slow pulse lived inside the silence that might have been her own. A step behind her. She didn't turn. Raphael stopped at a distance that let her feel him, and didn't let the door feel him. The hall adjusted its breath to include him. Sleep while you can, little healer, not an order. A sentence with bed in it and storm memory in the line he had laid along her jaw. She lowered her hand from the door and shifted sideways, not quite yielding the space, not quite owning it. You enjoy giving advice you hope I ignore. I enjoy watching you decide which part of you humans call sense. And if I choose wrong, I will correct you and you will resent me for saving you. Arrogant, accurate. He reached as if to touch her jaw again, then withheld the touch, and the absence felt newly invented. His wolf approved with a low contentment. Hold the hunger an hour longer. Mark her when the walls listen. She passed him, letting the brush of her sleeve take a thread of air. Leora met her with willow tea, the steam steady and the scent like bark learning to sweeten. Abigail held the mug until heat insisted and then drank, the bitterness resolving into a calm that didn't ask for permission. Taron set a small stack of worn books on the table, bindings scuffed like maps. He opened one to a sketch of leaves with a neat note about dosing. He lifted his gaze. If you want to argue with sleep, argue with this instead. It wins less often. I'll try. It belonged to someone whose opinions were useful when Northstorms thought themselves immortal. Edrin's boot scuffed the threshold once, a sound meant for the house rather than the people. He leaned in, measured the room without crossing the line, and went back to his slope. The mountain paid him the compliment of requiring him. Raphael stood at the hearth, fire giving his eyes a deeper gold. He watched the room as if it might name itself, if he gave it enough quiet. When his gaze settled on Abigail, it set the house down around her again like a cage without chains. Drink your willow, sleep while you can, and she drank. The tea told her heart to keep its seat. She set the mug aside and touched 2 fingers to the place along her jaw where his scent had lived all afternoon. Warmth still answered her touch, a thumbprint hidden under skin. Her wolf curled tighter and agreed to a night. She stood. The stove breathed contentment. The blue candle gave its last inch without ceremony. Leora's other flames held their ground. Taron's quiet walked with her to the door like a guard pretending to be silence. The heavy door at the back waited, patient as a winter animal in a den. The scratch did not come again. In her room, she left the door open a palm's width. The house breathed with her. Footsteps passed later and paused in the same place, the way a fingertip pauses on a pulse it has memorized. Her body answered the pause with the answer she refused to give her mouth. Sleep while you can, little healer, and she didn't respond. Her pulse did, steady and traitorous and alive. The room kept its own weather. Warmth held to the stone, fire glanced in the iron grate, and shadows sat heavy in the corners like wolves at rest. Abigail wore a thin groove into the long rug with her pacing. 10 strides to the window, 10 back to the oak door. The narrow pane showed only a strip of pale sky and a darker line of firs. She pressed her palm to the cold glass until her skin ached and then turned again because motion kept her thoughts from tearing through their own fences. You are making a trail he will count, Veyra warned, dry and certain. He enjoys knowing exactly how you move. Let him enjoy something that is not his to keep. Your breath gives you away when you lie to yourself. She switched the pace, angled for the hearth, then back to the door. Days had passed, enough for the quarters to map themselves onto her senses. The table beneath the window was worn to satin, where hands had steadied on their way to sit. A rack of books leaned near a carved screen that turned the bed into a suggestion, rather than a declaration. The scent in the room had settled into smoke, pine, and the mineral cool that clung to Raphael as if the mountain breathed through him. The latch lifted with that soft metal note, the house knew by heart. Abigail stopped in the middle of the rug, and made herself stay there, shoulders squared, head up. The door opened without haste. Raphael filled the threshold in a way that rearranged the space just by existing in it. Wind roughened his hair, damp at the ends, and a smear of bark darkened one knuckle as if he had steadied himself against a tree and the tree had noticed. "You are restless," he observed without looking away from her. The words landed low, the kind a body feels before it decides whether to answer. "This room takes small bites out of the day. I am making sure there is something left for it to chew." He shut the door with a steady hand. The quiet that followed was not empty. It was the kind of quiet that waits to see what will happen to it. He came forward with measured strides. The room got smaller not because he crowded her, but because nothing he did left the air alone. "You have been counting the seconds since sunrise, and I count because you keep taking them." The corner of his mouth moved. Not humor. Understanding. He reached the table and set a leather folder down, then stayed standing so the length of him could remind her how much space he could take without touching any at all. Dusk nosed up inside his mind with the contentment of a beast finding fresh snow. She fills the den with her scent. "Make it yours. Put your mouth where her pulse asks for teeth." "Not yet." "You sharpen the hunger and call it patience," Dusk purred. "She will lick the blade." Abigail crossed the final steps to the window and braced her palm again to the glass as if cold could argue better than she could. The mountain lay in restrained tears outside, light folded over the slopes like wool. A hawk traced slow circles above the birches. Her reflection ghosted in the pain, his reflection taller and nearer. "You are counting me," she murmured, "and always. What do the numbers tell you?" "That you can bear more than you like and you pretend you do not enjoy defiance when it fits your mouth too well." Veyra pressed a paw against Abigail's ribs from the inside. "He is naming you to yourself. Bite back." She turned, keeping the window at her shoulder. "Why am I in your quarters and not a guest room meant for inconvenient people?" "Because I am not a man who misplaces what matters, and because there are ears that belong to wolves who prefer stories over truth. So you keep the story where you can control it. I keep you where I can reach you." Her pulse misbehaved, leaping once as if surprised to find itself in the conversation. He heard it. She knew he heard it, because his attention dipped to the place at her throat where it lived. His steps brought him close enough that the heat of him touched her skin before anything else did. "You smell of willow and birch," he noted, "and that stubborn tea Leora makes when she wants a heart to keep its seat. And you smell like a storm that has not started yet. Then you know what weather you stand under." She refused the silence that tried to build after that. "What do your numbers say about home? That its door is shut to you until the person who killed your beta wishes to step through it and be welcomed." Her jaw tightened. "He died in my arms and I was accused before the blood cooled. I would like to teach someone how that felt. I will let you when it will hurt the right person." A knock clipped the air in a short, familiar rhythm, 2 and 1. Raphael did not look away from her. "Enter." Marin shouldered the door open with a tray balanced in one hand and a bundle under the other arm. His coat carried the mountain in damp, darker patches, and a wolf lifted its head and wagged once from the easy slouch of his posture before sliding back into human calm. He set the tray down on the table without clatter, and glanced between them with the quick, comprehensive look of a man who reads rooms like maps. "You two are crowding the air again." "We are teaching it," Raphael returned. Marin pulled a cloth from the bundle and set it beside the tray. "Bread, broth, and something sweet, because the day tends to go better when a mouth remembers sugar." He lifted his chin toward the window. "Scouts found more sign near the east drainage. Not hoof, not boar, not ours. Pattern says an old walker who knows the ground." Abigail felt that sentence drop into her bones because it fit too neatly with the footsteps that had paused outside her door in the night. Her skin told on her with a fine ripple along her arms. "Hunting us, looking." "And liking the looking," Marin admitted. He slid a quick glance at Raphael, and Silverpine is busy telling the Ridge they would never send blades under a Night Fang roof, which means they are either lying now or lied before. The Ridge does not care which, but it enjoys listening to men argue as they freeze. Abigail picked up the cup because her hands wanted something honest to touch. Steam rose with the scent of thyme and bone. She took a swallow too large and felt heat push back against the cold place that had been sitting under her heart since the wilds. "You look like you slept 2 hours and argued with weather in your dreams," Marin observed to Raphael. "The warriors think it is because you walk the eaves, so the house does not feel alone. The house appreciates your manners." Raphael accepted the observation with a small lift of the brows. He did not deny the eaves. Marin's gaze flicked to Abigail and softened in the way men soften when they decide courage has no business being forced into hardness. "The Omegas are taking bets on whether you'll throw the tray or the chair first. The chair pays better. Tell them to keep their coin, and I tried. They told me to mind my own business and bring you more honey." Raphael's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Report the rest. Rival packs want to know why we harbor an accused. The polite ones ask if we are selling justice now. The impolite ones call it weakness and promise to help us remember how to be cruel." Marin rolled a shoulder, as if shedding that last phrase before it tried to sit on him. "I told them we remember whatever we choose, and that my alpha takes payment in proof, not noise." "Thank you," Raphael replied, "the thanks an allowance, not an addendum. Eat, and then sleep when the sun moves 2 fingers past the high seam. Your wolf is carrying too much of you on too little patience." Marin saluted without seriousness and reached for a hunk of bread, then thought better of eating in front of Abigail and tucked it into a pocket. He touched 2 fingers to the table in an absent blessing and left, the door whispering shut behind him. Raphael turned back as if the interruption had been a breath and not a pause. He took the pitcher and poured water into a second cup, set it near her hand, then moved around the table until he occupied the space on the bench opposite. He didn't reach for food. He watched her eat and made her aware of how easy he could make this moment or how difficult, depending on his will. The stew tasted like a patient afternoon and salt from a hand that knew when to stop shaking. Abigail swallowed the useful heat and let her shoulders drop a degree. He let the change register in the clean ledger he kept behind his eyes. "You are looking for the line I will not let you cross," he observed in that leveled tone. "You draw a new line every time I get close to the last one. I draw only one. You refuse to notice how often you circle it. Where is it? Between the part of you that enjoys fighting me and the part that enjoys me. When those two agree, the line will move of its own accord." Veyra gave a low, traitorous sound. "He is not wrong, and I will not let him be the one who gets to be right about me." Raphael reached right then, as if he had been waiting for the exact second she decided to pull away from herself. He did not touch her face. He set 2 fingers on the underside of her wrist where it rested on the table. The contact was light, cooler than the cup, warmer than the glass had been, a listening more than a hold. The beat under his fingers told the truth with stubborn loyalty. "Do not read me like a page you own. I read you like a page I prefer not to burn and then stop breathing on it." He took his hand back with a small absence that felt larger than it should. Dusk uncoiled in his chest with a contented rumble. "Count her again. Make her notice that her numbers are not only hers." "You think control is a virtue," Abigail told him, keeping her voice steady. "Control is a tool. Virtues are things sermons use to pretend they can outshout hunger. And hunger wins only when it learns to wait." She stood not because she couldn't sit under his gaze, but because sitting lent itself too easily to forgetting how to move. The rug softened under her feet, and then flattened again as she took the old path she had worn in the last days. 10 strides to the window, 10 back to the door. The repetition steadied her, like a prayer she did not believe in but found herself whispering anyway. "If you want out, run now," Veyra urged without hope. "He will let you reach the hallway just so he can bring you back with his hands. I will not give him that satisfaction, then stop pacing for him." She stopped by the bed instead, fingers grazing the post once, as if wood could tell her a truth the rest of the room wouldn't. The linens were clean, without trying to be respectable. The mattress held the imprint of a body that did not waste rest when it took it. The thought of that sent her pulse up a step again, to her annoyance. Raphael stood with the certainty of someone who trusts the floor. He made no show of closing on her, but when she faced him again, the distance had vanished. He reached out and smoothed a strand of hair behind her ear with the back of his knuckles. The touch was gentle. The intent was not. It said, I can, and I will, and I know exactly how close I am to making a choice you will feel in your spine. You keep doing that. What? Touching me like you are tasting the air I am. And it tells me you do not want me to stop. Her hand lifted a fraction toward his chest, then fisted because the compromise between push and pull refused to pick a side. Her voice found iron. What do you want, Raphael? You. Alive. Near. Honest even when it costs you. That last word cut too close to the memory of her beta's mouth forming wrong wolf. She flinched before she could stop herself and hated that he caught it. Tell me what you hoped to hear when you asked him who did it. His voice gentled around the raw edge it found without losing the weight in it. She swallowed once and couldn't make the swallow hide ambitious truth. I wanted him to say a name I could survive. He said a truth you did not want, and then he took the chance to be questioned again. Your version of comfort tastes like knives. Knives are tools when you do not let them be stories. Use this one. Her breath shook as she let it in. He watched her stabilize it, neither helping nor enjoying the struggle, only allowing it to live long enough to become hers again. He broke the moment with a small change of subject that somehow did not let her go at all. You are not eating the sweet. I do not want your gifts. You want something of mine, and you think refusing sugar will keep your mouth clear of it. You are insufferable. Accurate. A fresh knock came, courteous and quick. Raphael angled his head without granting distance. Enter. Leora slipped in halfway with a pot of tea balanced on a small board and used her eyes to ask permission of both of them before stepping fully inside. Her presence changed the room's temperature, not cooler, not warmer, more human. I brought the willow bark steeped in mint. The day keeps getting clever, and I thought you might want your heart to keep its chair. Set it down, Raphael directed, moving aside just enough to let her pass. He looked at Abigail without losing the line of command in his posture. Drink. Abigail wrapped her hands around the cup because warmth had won too many times for her to forget its talent. Leora's glance took in details without prying. Abigail's bare feet. The way Raphael stood a fraction too close. The untouched sweet. The small tremor at the pulse in Abigail's neck that disappeared when the cup kissed her mouth. Leora left without making a sound the room would hold against them later. Raphael waited until the door had clicked into its settled place again. He stepped closer and let his voice find the low register that made honesty look like a dare. You have been kept in this room for days. You think I am testing you. I am. But not only you. Who else? Myself. And the wolf who wants to make decisions for me. Dusk pressed his weight against Raphael's ribs with a satisfied push. I do not ask for your permission to be correct. You are not the alpha here. Raphael returned with weary affection, and Dusk flicked an ear, unoffended. Abigail sipped. The bitter rounded into something almost kind. She felt steady, take a seat in her chest and stay there. She set the cup down. Her thumb brushed a line of moisture on the rim and came away wet. She did not lick it. She knew he was watching for small betrayals like that. You can let me out into the hall, she tried, not because she expected a yes, but because asking reminded her who she wanted to be. I can. And I will. When you stop using the request as a way to pretend you do not already live where you are. Your riddles smell like chains and your hunger smells like mine. For a second, silence opened clean between them, and in that clean he could have taken her mouth and learned what her breath kept trying to say for her. He did not. He leaned, slow enough that she could lean away and call it a choice, and rested his forehead very lightly against her temple. Not a kiss. Not a mark. A delicate weight that claimed air and left skin mostly unsullied. Veyra's breath blew warm across Abigail's thoughts. We could push him back, or we could stand still and count the beats. Dusk stretched with indolent satisfaction. Count for her. Teach her what the numbers mean when they belong to you both. Raphael spoke so near that his words landed partly on her skin. You are not a prisoner. You are a story I do not intend to let other men finish. You will be safe, because I refuse to learn how to live without you if I fail. You do not get to decide whether the world writes me. No, but I decide whether it reads you while I am watching. Her eyes closed on their own. The space between them remembered how to be actual space, and he stepped back, leaving the outline of his presence like a promise left on a table where a hand could find it again. Eat the sweet, he told her, and this time it sounded like something else altogether. She picked up the small square of honey cake because defiance can be a coat and a prison at once. The sugar melted and made her mouth remember a gentler hour. She hated that a noise almost escaped from the back of her throat and kept it by biting the inside of her cheek. His gaze marked the restraint and filed it with everything else. You are unbearable, she murmured around the last swallow. Accurate. He moved to the door and set his palm flat to the panel for a long second, as if taking the measure of what waited out there. The posture changed his shoulders, broadened them, brought the beast inside him nearer to the surface, without letting it out. He looked back, and whatever he saw on her face altered his expression by a degree too small to name. Rest. I will be near. Marin will bring news when the ridge remembers its manners. If you need anything, call for me. Not for anyone else. I do not call, then whisper, the walls deliver. He left, and the quiet stepped in immediately and sat beside her on the bench like an old friend who had learned new tricks. Abigail stood a moment longer, still enough to hear the candle's tiny hiss and the low chuff of the fire. She touched 2 fingers to the place at her temple where his forehead had rested, as if verifying that the weight had left no visible ash. Then she went to the window and put her palm against the cold, until the skin there could not tell which heat it missed more, the glass or the man. The chair held her for a minute, then the room slid Abigail back onto her feet. She crossed to the window and set her palm to the cold glass until the ache steadied her pulse. The carved screen cast a lace of shadow over the bed and rug, turning the quarters into a map she knew by instinct now. The latch lifted. Raphael entered with the quiet of someone who already owned the space, dark leather looped over his fingers. You did not sleep, you did not tell me to, you would have ignored me. Try me. He let the door rest and leaned his forearm to it a heartbeat, measuring wood, then crossed the room. The leather caught a line of light. A crest pressed into it, a wolf cut through by a single stroke. He set it on the table like a tool. Wear it. No. His gaze found the small jump at her throat and listened to it as if numbers had sent. Dusk rose inside him, pleased. Take her hand. Fasten our mark. She leans. Not yet. You sharpen hunger until it sings. He closed the inches without touching. It is not a collar. It is a warning to the ridge. While you wear it, hands will learn distance. I never asked for your crest, and you asked to live long enough to clear your name. She lifted the leather, tested the soft inner side, the cool face of the plate. You give me a leash and call it mercy. I give the world a sign and call it a cost. Make terms. Raphael opened his hand, palm up. Patient. Wear it within my territory. Take it off when you are alone in a room I made safe. Tell me when you remove it. Tell me when you put it back on. If anyone reaches for you, I break what reaches. Iron and honey, not dessert. She left the cuff where it lay. She brushed past him and stopped at the screen, lacquer keeping a secret. The bed behind it was only outline, a quiet dare. You could keep me safe without turning me into a message. I could. Symbols keep fools from trying. They also keep my own from testing my hand. You do not trust your pack, and I trust them to be wolves. Veyra came forward dry. He is right about danger. Make the mountain spend fewer teeth on you. I will not wear him to be safe, then wear him to win. She reached for the cuff again as he did. The edge nicked her thumb. A sting bright enough to catch breath. Blood welled fast and neat. Raphael took her wrist, steady but not cruel, and turned to the table. Sit? No. He set a basin, added clear spirit that cut the air. This will sting. It already does. Good. That means you are listening. He cleaned the cut with precise strokes, salved it with pine and green, wrapped a strip of linen and tied a sure bow. Hold it. Not tight enough to forget you are alive. Her hand rested over his palm a breath longer than necessary. The leather thong he had wound around his own hand creaked when his fingers flexed. You tie yourself to remember restraint, I tie myself to remember choice. You expect me to believe this cuff is mine to choose, and I expect you to decide it in front of me. A knock clipped the quiet. Taron entered with cold on his shoulders and the look of a man who had counted distances morning. His gaze skimmed their hands, then the cuff, and filed both. East Ridge is steady but rude, doubled backtracks at the birch seam. Edrin asks permission to end the counting with his boot. Not yet, let them measure once more. If they do, be the lesson. Taron's eyes marked the linen at Abigail's thumb. The porch is salted. The sun lies. If you need air, take a blanket and dout everything bright. Noted. Taron left. The door closed on a breath. Abigail studied the little bow at her thumb, felt the small throb like a living argument. Put it on me. Dusk growled approval. Finally, Raphael did not rush. He stood close enough for warmth to find her and took her hand, turning her wrist, thumb beneath, fingers above. You can change your mind. Do it. He fastened the leather with one clean motion. The plate cooled on skin. Weight settled like a decision. He kept her palm up and laid his over it, the thong pressing into her lifeline. One measured count, then release. Your pulse has opinions, always. His gaze tracked wrist, throat, mouth, then back again. Veyra breathed against her thoughts, low and hot. He wears restraint like hunger with manners. Marin knocked twice and entered with a covered bowl and a folded note. He saw the cuff, then Raphael's bound hand, and the corner of his mouth moved. Broth and news. The first is gentle, the second is not. Sign by Hollow Bend. Not ours. Not deer. Smoother than a man. Lighter than a wolf that knows the trail. Whoever it is has been here before. Distance. Half an hour from the lower birch if you move like Edrin on a morning. Ash in a neat circle by the creek. Something burned and left no scent that belongs to the trees. Abigail's stomach tightened. For me. Marin gave her a steady look. Whoever made that fire has more patience than hunger. That is worse. Raphael broke thread on the note, read, closed his fingers over the paper. Double inward, watch after dusk. Edrin the lower run. Taron the east. I will be on the roof. Marin let out a breath. The Omegas ask if the quiet is the good kind. I told them it lets us hear trouble when it forgets to be careful. Abigail glanced down at the cuff. Your promises multiply, only because fools do. Marin set the bowl on the table and tapped his knuckles once. A blessing. Honey at the bottom. Leora hid it so you cannot pretend you dislike sweetness. He flicked a look at the back hall. The pantry door sticks again. Whatever is behind it should learn manners, I will see to it. Try not to see it with your knife. Marin paused at the door. If the sky darkens too fast, keep your feet where the walls can count them. The door shut. The room kept the new weight. Raphael slid the broth toward her. Drink. She sipped. Heat moved outward and made her shoulders lower. You behave like a man who thinks care is control. Care is information. Control is how I spend it, and you enjoy the spending, and I enjoy not burying people I'm not finished with. The words hit and soothed. She drew thumb along the cuff's edge, feeling the shift from leather to skin. Give me one truth you kept from me. Raphael looked at the window where daylight thinned. Your beta sent word 2 days before he died. It never reached me. The runner vanished between the east post and the creek. Sound tried to rise and she refused it. Veyra snarled. He tried, he did, and someone cut message and path. You tell me now. I wanted to know if you could stand when the ground moved. She reached for the cup because hands need tasks that are not breaking something. The tea was gone. The broth warmed bitterness. I stood. You did. You owe me for that truth. Ask. Let me walk the inner hall without you. 10 minutes, no longer. Veyra leaned forward in her bones. Dusk pressed, patient and possessive. Refuse and carry her. 10 minutes, Raphael said. The inner hall and the east porch. Leora will follow at a distance. If you cross the birch line, I will end the walk with my hands. You enjoy threatening to carry me. I enjoy knowing I will not have to. She moved to the door because thanks threatened her mouth. He opened it with the care he used on blades. The corridor met her with cool air and the sound of the house moving itself. She walked its length and back, touching nothing, counting breaths. Leora appeared near the stairs with a basket on her hip, dried leaves clattering in a jar. The girl's eyes warmed at the cuff. If you want the east light, it is gentler now. The steps have no tricks left from yesterday. I will take the porch. Leora turned with her, close enough to catch if a knee buckled, far enough to pretend she would not. Outside, resin and thin sun. The view fell to the pale seam of birch and the dark ocean of fir. Abigail stood within the limit and breathed until the ache loosened. A boot touched the far end of the porch. Edrin's shadow cut the slats. He kept his gaze on the trees and his voice low. If you step past the birches, the slope will pretend to be a friend and then push. It likes examples. Does it like you? It likes that I am meaner. He glanced at the cuff and snorted. That keeps idiots from testing your bones. The ones who are not idiots will try other things. Stay where the house can hear you. I hear you. Good. He moved off with the sound of an animal that had decided not to hunt yet. Abigail stood 5 breaths more, then turned back inside. Raphael waited just within, too still for accident. His eyes checked her face the way hands check heat near a stove. You did not run, where would I go, and everywhere, yet you came back. She touched the cuff, then let her hand fall. You thought I would throw it into the snow. You do not throw away what you can use. She stopped at the table. The leather sat snug at her wrist, a new gravity that belonged to this room and to the man who kept rearranging its weather. Tell me about the runner. A boy with quick feet and good ears. He left the post with the moon up and never reached the next fire. We found a scuff in the needles and a broken thorn. No scent that belonged to mine. So someone walked between us and left no name. Yes. Teach me how to hunt in a house. Begin with stillness. It brings the animal closer. End by choosing what you will do when it arrives. Light thinned. The bell at the lower birch lifted a single quiet note and stopped, as if a hand covered it gently. Marin's stride hit the corridor. He appeared in the doorway, urgency threaded tight. Strangers on the western switchback, not ours, not Silverpine. They moved like they came to look at the mountain and stayed to listen to it breathe. How many? 4, maybe 5. Iron and old water. Abigail glanced at the back hall where the heavy door held its own silence. The world was gathering. The bargain on her wrist felt like a line drawn in ash. Raphael stepped between her and the door without making it look like a shield. Stay within the room. If you need me, call. I will hear. You always do. He turned at the threshold, heat flaring before he banked it. Keep her here, Dusk urged, satisfied. Make the world learn your mark. Raphael left. The latch whispered. Abigail stood where he had placed her and lifted her wrist. The leather rested against her pulse like a quiet hand, and did not let go. From the back hall, a faint scrape tested wood, measured and patient. Veyra went very still, ears up. He hears you. She touched the cuff once more and breathed through the heat under it. Do not move, she told herself. Move. Dusk whispered from memory. He will always find you anyway. Night pooled in the corners before Abigail realized the light had slipped away. The quarters felt gathered tight, as if the stone were bracing. From the back hall came a single scratch across the heavy door, soft and deliberate, drawing a line through the quiet and then gone. He hears you, Veyra warned. He likes your steps. Do not give him more. Abigail stood halfway to the corridor with her hand lifted, then forced her fingers to lower. The cuff sat cool on her wrist, then warmed as her pulse climbed. She breathed through her teeth and tasted smoke and mint, and the faint metallic echo of fear. A courtesy knock touched the latch. Leora slipped in with a bundle of candles and a kettle. She moved like someone who had taught air not to bump into her. One by one, she set wicks to life on the mantel until the room held a steady glow. You look like the air forgot to reach you. The air thinks it belongs to someone else. It does, Leora admitted, pouring tea. But it shares when told. 3 strangers on the switchback. They argued with the wind, then remembered iron. How close? Closer than kind, not close enough to touch the door. Abigail sipped and felt tightness loosen by degrees. Steps came heavier, measured. Marin filled the doorway, damp hair and a coat that smelled like cold. He took in candles, tea, the cuff at her wrist, and the line of her jaw. You're using candles like a sermon. They listen better than men, Leora said. 4 shapes at most, Marin reported. 2 favor the left foot. 1 forgets to breathe when he thinks. A mark on a birch cut by a blade with a nick above the hilt. I saw where it skipped. For me? For curiosity. Curiosity likes bait. The latch turned again. Raphael stepped in. Night leaned along his shoulders, scent sharpened by cold. He read the room in a breath. Report. 3 on the bend, Marin repeated. A shadow near the old cairn. They measured with their ears. Let them try with their bones, Raphael returned, Edrin. Lower slope, Marin answered. He hums when he's pleased. He's humming. Taron. East seam salted twice, then brushed with birch scrapings to turn noses around. He wants to split them further. Good. Raphael's gaze found Abigail last, which made it strike deeper. You will stay in this room until morning. Not the hall, not the porch. If you need air, stand by the window and pretend. No, it is not a debate. Everything with you is a debate. When you insist on losing, Veyra showed her teeth. Do not give him a soft refusal. Give him one that tastes like stone. I went to the porch and the sky did not fall, Abigail answered. The only thing that tried to touch me wore your scent. Raphael came closer, slow enough to be clear, fast enough to erase inches. Heat slid ahead of him like tide. Dusk uncurled, delighted. Take the wall. Make the room remember. You are not leaving these quarters without me. You are not putting your hands on me to keep the mountain happy. You mistake the order of my concerns. Marin cleared his throat once, a man who knows when to let animals circle. I'll run the west line and let Taron steal my shadow if he needs it. Leora, the inner shutters are sulking. Talk them into reason. Leora gathered kettle and unlit candles. At the door, she aimed a small steadiness at Abigail. If the house goes too quiet, make noise. They left. Firelight cut a clean edge along Raphael's jaw. His eyes burned at the deeper end of amber, heat buried under control. Do not make me bar the door, Abigail. You like bars. They give your patience a sound. You like breaking bars. It gives your defiance a prize. She shifted sideways for air. He matched easily, herding her toward the lower ceiling. He still left her paths to the table and the window. She noticed and hated noticing. Why fasten restraint to your palm and then look at me like you hate it more than danger? Because both are true. Then stop pretending I crack if the wind blows. You don't. That is why I want you in one place. The things outside learn to move like wind. His knuckles skimmed the leather at her wrist. That is not a collar. Then stop watching it like it will walk me. It walks everyone else. A bell lifted a flat note from below and died. Raphael's head tilted, listening past walls. Dusk tugged at him. He is at the birches. He wants to run. He wants to bleed. Later, Raphael told the wolf and returned to her. My men will do what I taught them. My job is this room. Your job is your land. My land includes you. Heat struck the base of her throat. She turned, unlatched the window a finger's width. Cold slipped in and touched the inside of her mouth. He came behind her without sound. The cold eased. You crowd the air, then you leave. You breathe easier when you're forced to hear yourself. He set 2 fingers to the hinge to steady the pain. Leather brushed her sleeve. Frost ticked softly as it thinned. Veyra paced. Make him choose, then learn him. She snapped the window shut. He didn't step back. His breath changed, controlled and close. 3 equal taps sounded. Taron entered with lean haste, calm stitched tight. His glance went to the cuff, then to Raphael. Switchback cleared without our hands, tracks cut north, not ours, not theirs. They stepped between prints to make us believe the trail forgot. And the cairn. Disturbed, then set back wrong on purpose. Taron looked to Abigail. If I wanted to pull a healer, I'd use a story that smelled like home. I don't follow stories anymore. Raphael's voice thinned to command. Double the watch on the north lip. Do not be baited into a run. Press them toward the gorge if they test again. Taron nodded. Leora has blankets and warnings stacked. People swear they don't need either, then hold both. Stay on the seam until the moon drops, wedge your shadow under Edrin's. Taron was gone before the candle could flicker. Abigail's knuckles were pale on the sill. You gave orders like you meant to lock me in and keep the key under your tongue. Where else would you prefer it? In my hand. He reached for her wrist. She pulled back a fraction. He did not alter course. His fingers traced the seam where leather met skin, as if checking for a lie. You are under my roof. I pay for every mistake, including yours. I will not pay with your blood. You don't get to decide my blood is a price you can name. I already did, and I intend to be stingy. A short laugh escaped her, unwilling. She moved to the table and drank the lukewarm mouth of tea for the occupation. The latch turned. Leora returned with a small lamp and a basket. She trimmed the wick until the flame stood taller, and glanced toward the back hall. Do not walk near the heavy door. I don't intend to. Good intentions are brittle. Leora set a folded length of wool on the chair. If the house tries to sleep too fast, wake it. Her hand brushed Abigail's shoulder once and withdrew. You are not going to the great room tonight, Raphael said, choosing a distance he could cross in half a heartbeat. You told me I would. I changed my mind. You enjoy rearranging the world because you can. I enjoy standing between you and what thinks it owns you. She moved to pass him. He did not allow it. His palm hit the wall beside her head and he leaned, pinning by proximity. Heat slid over her cheek. His other hand hovered near her jaw, the place he had scented yesterday. Your men are outside, your house is listening, and you want to end an argument with your body. I plan to end one, then use words. Words are the least trustworthy part of me. Dusk crowded his pupils, dark and wide. Take her now, teach her breath our name. Not with a mouth I won't be able to stop. Veyra bristled, alert. If he bites, do not shudder. If he does not, do not beg. Make him choose. Abigail tipped her chin a fraction, exposing the line of her throat as challenge. Raphael lowered until his breath warmed the place under her ear. He didn't kiss. He didn't bite. He dragged the lower half of his face along her jaw, laying his scent deeper until her skin accepted it like heat poured into metal. He stopped at the corner of her mouth and did not cross. No one will take you from me. You do not own me to be taken. No one will take you from me, he repeated, the words turning from threat into vow. Her breath snagged. He lifted away an inch, then 2, arms still braced to hold the wall, trapping space without closing it. You will stay in this room. If anything not mine tries the door, call my name. The walls carry it faster than your feet. You expect obedience because you pressed your face to my skin. I expect obedience because you want to live more than you want to prove me wrong. A scrape sounded from the hall, then a soft thud. Both turned their heads. The heavy door went quiet, but the aftermath hung like breath. Edrin's voice cut low down the corridor. Back to your corners, ghosts. Raphael's attention narrowed, then eased. He touched 2 fingertips to the cuff, as if reminding it and himself of the decision. Eat, then lie down, he told her. You don't owe me sleep, you owe your body rest. You owe me what's behind that door. Later. Your favorite word. Your favorite complaint. Edrin filled the threshold a moment later, shoulder and glare first. His eyes swept the room, stopped on the bracket of Raphael's arm, and lifted a brow. Perimeter quiet for now. Something keeps stepping just out of weight where there should be weight. If it tests birch again, I'll put it on its back and ask if it likes stones. Do not bring it inside to ask. I am mean, not stupid. Edrin's gaze found the cuff. That buys me time to reach you if someone forgets to read. Keep it on until light shames fools. He left. The hinge swallowed the roughness. Abigail realized her palms were flat to the wall, as if her body wanted proof the world remained. Raphael eased back, and the space returned, marked by his heat. You sent me like I'm yours to track. You asked why the cuff. Consider this a better answer. Heat uncurled through her middle, unwilling and real. She poured water to give her hands a task. He watched every motion. Marin reappeared, quick and contained. They're gone for now. Drifted north as if called. Leaves flared in a clean line. No prints where there should be prints. If they come again, they'll test our patience and hers, Raphael answered. Teach them we have too much of the first and none of the second. Marin nodded. The house wants to pretend this is finished. I told it to try that lie in the morning. He vanished, and the quiet felt more watchful than threatening. Raphael chose a place 2 steps away, a distance he could cross between one beat and the next, and let her see he could. You think I'll run? I think you will test the latch when the world suggests a good time to be foolish. If I run, it will be because you ran me to the edge. If you run, it will be because you do not yet know what you belong to. You keep using that word. You think belonging is a deed it isn't. Teach me then, he said, quiet as breath. Do it from inside this room. Veyra settled along her spine with a reluctant hum. He is not wrong. Keep your teeth. Choose your time. Abigail lowered to the edge of the bed because standing felt like more confession than she owed. He did not follow. He stood where he could see door and window, and her at once. A soldier, mapping ground. Tell me something true before you keep watch. I am not calm. You look like calm carved into a man. I look like a promise I intend to make expensive. A thin laugh escaped her. The nearest candle leaned and corrected. She lay back, not surrendering so much as truce with her own nerves. The blanket Leora left at the foot of the bed kept warmth it shouldn't. The cuff rested against her pulse, like a quiet hand. Raphael stood with his palm on the door as if feeling the world throb through wood. The heavy door down the hall remembered how to breathe and forgot again. Dusk pressed teeth into restraint and held there, pleased. Keep her, the wolf urged. I am, Raphael breathed, too low for human ears. Do not let your mercy be the reason we lose her. It will be the reason we do not. He looked once more at the woman in his bed, at the mark on her wrist, at the dark beyond the door, and gave the night a truth only the walls needed to carry. No one will take her from me. Night pressed hard against the stone until the torches outside looked like small stubborn stars. Wind moved in slow breaths along the walls, tasting of wet pine and iron, and the stronghold listened the way a body does when it waits for pain. Abigail stood at the narrow window with one palm to the cold glass. The pane held her reflection in a thin silver, Raphael's quarters behind her turning into layered shadows and banked fire. The cuff at her wrist cooled first, then warmed with her pulse as if it remembered who had fastened it there. You are counting like prey, Veyra warned, dry and steady. Choose your breath and make it obey. I am choosing. Choose harder. The latch lifted with a quick metal note. The door swung into wind, and Marin, shoulders damp with mist, coat dark where the night had leaned on him. He didn't waste words. Borders hot, not with flame, with men who want to be. Lower turns tested. Edrin enjoyed failing them. Another set is listening close enough to pretend they're not breathing. Raphael was already moving, that unhurried economy that made speed look like a habit he had filed for easy use. He took the room in one glance. Abigail at the window, the kettle Leora had left warm on the trivet, the candle smoke slanting toward the door as if the corridor inhaled. His eyes were wolf gold, not bright so much as deep, the color heat takes when it hides behind iron. How many? 4 at the lower, Another 3 or 5 at the north seam if you count the shadows that think a mountain will excuse them for acting like they're smoke. Taron, salting the east and combing birch scrapings into places noses shouldn't trust. He wants the line to split. It will. Good. Edrin. Lower slope. Humming. The humming means he plans to be rude on purpose. Abigail pulled her palm from the glass and turned because cold had become a leash. Raphael crossed the floor and the air changed temperature by a degree in favor of breathing. He didn't touch her. The possibility of it lived between them like a coiled thing. You will stay in this room, voice low enough to slip under noise, not the hall, not the porch, not the window open past a crack. No, I am not negotiating the location of your body while knives look for it. You are not negotiating the location of my breath ever. Marin's gaze flicked between them and then politely away. Outside, the courtyard bell gave a single flat ring and cut itself off as if a hand had smothered it. A chair scraped somewhere below. A door argued with a bar and lost. Lior's voice carried one firm line about water, blankets, and keeping children's names where a mouth could reach them quickly. Raphael stepped in just 1 inch closer, enough that her ribs noticed. Stay. Lock me in and call it love. Call it refusal to bleed you out for a principle that buries you well. Veyra pressed hard at Abigail's ribs. He offers the shape of love he understands. It is ugly. It is honest. You always decide for me and I decide for my land. My land includes you. She lifted her chin. I decide for me. We do not have time for ritual. The enemy is already speaking in bad grammar on my slope. Marin exhaled short. The Western Bend wants orders delivered like a sermon and obeyed like a song. Give me both. Also the right to ignore them if the mountain thinks it's funny. Go, keep Taron honest, keep Edrin from dragging something inside just to ask it questions. If the birches get touched, make the lesson expensive. Marin's mouth tilted. Expensive is a favorite subject. He cut a knuckle against the door in a habit that looked like a blessing, and took the corridor at a half-run that didn't rattle the floor. Raphael looked back at Abigail. Full weight now, nothing held in reserve. The torches outside swung restless ellipses across the courtyard, making the night blink. He didn't reach yet. He liked asking first with air. Stay. No. He leaned both hands on the chair back, arms braced, caging the space without touching her, leaving only the choice of backing away or walking through him. Dusk pressed velvet and teeth into his mind. Mark her. Now. Solve the argument. Make the world read you. Not like this. Like this is when the world learns. Her voice dropped. You think danger turns want into permission. I think danger turns lies into funerals. The bell tried to lift a second note and someone refused it. A deep, old snarl rolled up the stones like thunder, learning how to walk. Taron's orders cut clean through, dividing panic into jobs. Abigail's chest hurt with a new kind of fear when she realized she knew the names of people whose feet were making those sounds. You're asking me to listen to them fight and do nothing. I'm ordering you to be alive tomorrow when they want a healer who didn't die proving she was brave. The door shivered and then banged wide. Edrin filling the frame with cold and a grin that showed too many teeth. Blood darkened the edge of his sleeve and left a smear along the handle as if announcing the night had already paid a fee. Lovers later. Perimeter now. 3 forgot how to wear feet at the lower birch. The slope taught them manners. Something else followed, and didn't bother with ground like it believed in better things. I hate him. Numbers, 4 less near the east after Salt and Sticks reminded them of childhood. 2 at the north who move like stories, pretending they're men. The one I hate thinks the air owes him. He walks on it and expects thanks. Raphael stepped into the corridor, checked the slice of hall with one slow look, then re-entered, as if he needed the room to see he could be in 2 places with no effort. Stay, he told Abigail again, and this time the word tasted like iron. He went to the rack by the carved screen and took the long knife that had lived beneath the bed since before he knew every ridge by heart. The sound of wood releasing steel was small, certain. He slid it along his belt and flexed the leather thong circling his palm. The thong creaked when his hand closed. His gaze skimmed her mouth before he could stop it. Then he did stop it, because restraint liked to be seen when it worked this hard. You bar the door if anything not mine tries it, you call my name. The walls carry it faster than your legs. I don't call men to save me. Then call a promise to collect what belongs to it. A word rose to her tongue and burned. Edrin barked a short appreciative sound and tilted his head like a dog entertained in a church. A shadow slid dark over the window, and the torches guttered as the wind tried to take pleasure in bullying flame. From below came the blunt thud of bodies learning stone, and a voice cutting off a scream by turning it into work. Abigail found she had moved without knowing it. Her knuckles touched Raphael's chest for the length of one breath. He held still, then didn't, a twitch in his wrist where Dusk lunged. Let me mark her later. You keep meaning never. Later is when later. Abigail stepped into him in a way because gravity had learned her. If I stay, you come back. I always do. You don't, I will. Edrin rolled his shoulder in the door like a bull warming a neck. Argue in bed when it's done. For now, break something that isn't each other. Raphael reached past Abigail and laid 2 fingers on the window frame as if reading the cold. His other hand found her chin lightly and brought her gaze back up, the gesture gentle in the way a hunter checks an animal's breath before letting it go. Breathe. Do not cry. If you cry, do it after I wash in other men's mistakes and make them apologize for thinking you were theirs to count. Bring me back truth with their names scraped off. He released her and the absence left heat like a seal set in wax. He turned to go. Edrin stepped aside, smirk ready, weather on his shoulders. I'll keep the floor honest. I'll keep the night honest. They were gone in an exhale of cold. The room held its breath. The torch outside coughed and recovered. Abigail stood with 2 fingers on her jaw where his had lingered. It felt like a choice he had made and was not finished making. Leora slipped in with a basin and cloths and a small pouch of salt, moving like someone the house trusted to rearrange its temperature. She took Abigail's hands without asking, pressed cool over the back of her knuckles and looked her over the way birds look at weather. Your pulse is an animal, sit. Give it a corner to curl in, I can stand. Of course, sit anyway. Abigail sat because the alternative was pacing holes in the rug. The mint in the basin lifted clean and green. Leora set the salt on the table and met Abigail's gaze with a steadiness that felt like borrowed bone. The trick with fear is it loves empty rooms. Fill yours. Count 9 breaths. Tell me which pain rattles on the second gust. Name the tools on the shelf. Whisper the herbs so you remember your hands. Abigail did it because tasks made the minutes eatable. 9 breaths. Second pain on the left. Knife, tinder, jar, bowl, bandage. Willow, feverfew, yarrow, mint. Saying them made her chest obey. Marin will live because he gets offended by being wrong. Leora murmured, eyes on the door. Taron will live because patience married his spine. Edrin will live because he is his own weather. Raphael will live because he promised you and he hates breaking his own rules and he promised himself. Sometimes that's the same promise. Footsteps crossed the corridor with the exact weight of Taron. He slipped in, rain in his hair, sleeves wet, calm wound tight around worry like cloth. He nodded to Leora, then to Abigail, eyes flicking once to the cuff with respect rather than interest. North is listening to itself breathe, good and bad. The cairn's wrong again. The wrongness is tidy. I do not forgive tidy wrongness. You keep your tone steady when knives walk. Steady helps other people remember how to pry their lungs loose. He placed a small pouch beside the salt. Red bark. The kind that keeps pain from ruining decisions. Keep it. If your hands need to work when your body would rather shake, they're already working. Good, keep them honest. Leora tilted her head, listening with more than ears. 1 step not ours. Now 2. Now gone. Edrin's shadow filled the window and cut away. The hinge whispered as he leaned without opening. Alive. Report or comfort. Both. The minutes thinned. Every sound carried 3 meanings and all of them mattered. Once, a howl skated so close to the glass that the pane trembled. Leora's fingers braced the table, and then released it because even steady needed furniture sometimes. Abigail breathed in the mint and tasted calmer than she deserved. Veyra prowled the line of her spine, not panicked now, tuned. He is a wall that moves. We choose when to be stone and when to be knife. When the door opened again, it did so with care, as if the room might bolt. Raphael stepped in with the knight fitted to him like a second skin. Blood marked his knuckles and darkened the cuff of his sleeve. His hair was wet where mist had tried to learn him. His eyes found Abigail first, softened by a fraction that would have been invisible to most people. Dusk pressed against his teeth, amused and hungry. Report. Taron answered like water sliding around a rock. North Seam unsettled but holding, West Bend bruised and sulking. The cairn is still a liar. The liar is precise. We will teach it, Mess Edrin. Edrin leaned into the frame, grin sharper, temper satisfied. I chased a shadow until it remembered it had a body. It ran downhill like wisdom discovered late. It will return when pride fixes its memory. I will be waiting with stones. If you carry it inside to show me, I will break your wrists. I am mean, not stupid. Raphael moved fully into the room and the air returned to its earlier alignment. He lifted a hand as if to touch Abigail and stopped it halfway on purpose, redirecting to the mantle, to heat he did not need. He made his restraint visible. Dusk stalked under his skin, annoyed. Mark her. Make breath easier. Then go spill theirs. Later. You both love that word. Raphael closed the last of the distance until her breath met his again. Stay, voice roughened by work. Not because ordering you pleases me, because waking up with you alive will. If I stay, you don't forget me while you fight. I have not forgotten you in any room I ever owned. He turned to go. Her finger reached of its own will and pressed to the leather thong around his palm. The thong creaked softly. Do not let mercy trick you into a mistake. Mercy is a blade I sharpen before use. If it cuts you, then I bleed where you can reach me. He left like storms leave with a promise to return. Edrin went with an oath that sounded like a hymn turned inside out. Taron flowed after them, patience setting the pace. Leora and Abigail were left with heat, mint, the low growl of stone. Time forgot itself. Noise rose and fell. The house kept count because the people could not. Abigail stood, sat, stood, paced 3 steps, returned to the chair because her ankle reminded her it had opinions. Leora poured and counted under her breath, small numbers tied together by calm. Veyra rested with head up and ears forward. Good. Reserve the bite. Choose the throat. The bell lifted once more and gave up. Torches flared as if remembering how. Howls drew off toward the North Seam and hid behind trees. The door opened again on a draft of cold, and Raphael crossed the threshold with his control frayed to threads and still holding. Second wave, he said without saying it loudly. They learned something and think it a secret. It is not. I am going to rename it. You do not move from this room. No. He was on her before the word finished, palm braced to the wall beside her head. Breath a single weather. His other hand hovered near the place he had scented, a gravity more than a touch. Your wolf hears me. You hear me. If they take you, they do not take only you. They take the thing I am not giving the world. You use fear like a hand on my throat, and I use truth. The price of surviving is work. I will pay it. You will let me. Veyra met Dusk across the thin place where human and animal share heat. Not yet. Earn it with something other than war. War is my language, Dusk purred. Then translate, Veyra returned. Abigail's mouth softened against her will. You come back and then we finish this argument with no knives in the room. I will. He dragged the lower half of his face along her jaw again. Slow, deliberate, possessive, without bite, and pulled away before hunger reached for permission it hadn't earned. He looked to Leora. Keep her. The house will owe you. The house already does. He was gone, the corridor swallowing him. the torches outside grabbing air with greedy hands. The stronghold braced for another lesson. A shout tore the dark. Claws struck stone. The floor trembled under a charge that turned into 2 charges, then 3. Leora pressed her palm to the door panel and leaned, feeling the night through wood. Abigail stood, body telling on itself with heat and readiness, and the memory of a promise breathed against her skin. The handle jolted once as someone collided with the other side. A voice she knew snapped an order, and the pressure eased. Footsteps faded. The heavy door down the back hall stayed quiet, patient as teeth behind lips. The night gathered its next weight. The argument waited with it, suspended between them like a trap set and not sprung. Abigail found the cuff warm against her pulse, and the place along her jaw warmer still, as if both had learned to keep her in one piece while the world tried to break itself. Noise rushed the corridor. Stone took it and threw it back. Light swung long across the window and vanished. Raphael's stride cut the end of the hall like a blade. He caught the door with one hand, reached across the room with the other, and closed on her wrist in a hold that made space and stole it at once. Into the shadow, little healer. He drew her behind the carved screen and the tall wardrobe where the lamplight could not trespass. His back took the angle, his body made the wall. He lifted 2 fingers in front of her mouth, not touching. Command without bruise. Breath met. Breath in the strip of darkness. Hot against cold. And the corridor outside filled with the sound of the enemy arriving. The corridor tightened around sound until it felt like the stronghold had a heartbeat of its own. Raphael moved first, sliding into the hall with his shoulders angled. Breath quiet, eyes already hunting the places light didn't reach. Abigail kept to his left, close enough to feel the heat off his arm, far enough that he could pivot without colliding with her. The air tasted of pine smoke and iron and the metallic bite of nerves people don't admit to. Far down the passage, someone hit a door that wasn't a door and learned the difference. Hold the bend, Taron's voice cut clean through the rush. 2 down. Keep feet. Edrin's laugh rolled up the stones like something feral that chose to speak. Come, do it again. I'm feeling generous. Dusk prowled under Raphael's skin, velvet dark and eager. Take her to ground. We hunt faster when she's where our mouth can find her. We hunt faster when she can stand, Raphael answered and kept moving. A shadow broke loose near the stairwell. Raphael met it without haste, caught a wrist, and turned bone into a conversation that ended quickly. The knife clattered and skittered. Edrin's boot arrived and crushed the idea of retrieving it. Wrong house, Edrin growled, shouldering another man into the wall hard enough for the wall to remember. Another shape slipped down the rail above the stairs, light on hands and hungry. Abigail felt the wrongness a breath before she saw it, a cold thread down the back of her neck. Left. Roofline. The thought wasn't words so much as instinct pulled into shape. Her hand hit Raphael's shoulder in a quick push. He pivoted under her touch, and the knife meant for the hinge of his neck cut air and met stone with a spark. He turned, caught the descending forearm, and slid the man into the corridor like a drawer slammed shut. The body hit, folded, stayed. You keep count for me, Raphael murmured without turning his head. Only because you listen. They pressed into the courtyard in a rush of torchlight and cold air. Flame climbed iron brackets, bleeding stubborn light into wet stone. The enemy wore mismatched leathers with symbols cut away, like men who had stolen other men's stories. Their eyes shone wrong in the torches, too bright and hungry in a way that didn't belong to wolves alone. Raphael took the center of the space like an oath forced into form. He kept Abigail behind and left, 1 arm's length, a place where his body could become a wall faster than thought. He fought with a precision that made chaos look inefficient. His long knife drew quiet lines that turned attack into regret. He didn't chase, he placed. He let their speed deliver them, and then refused to let them have what they came for. Taron moved like math, angles, and timing, stepping where mistakes would be born to smother them before they took their first breath. Marin slid through with blunt competence, shoulders and elbows doing unsentimental work. Edrin grinned his way into joy, meeting an attacker's rush with a shove that became a throw. Then, a lesson. Abigail kept to the wall where the stone's cold steadied the heat rising in her chest. Veyra stood inside her like a sentinel, ears up. Watch edges. The real cut hides in the second movement, not the first. A pair approached in a staggered rhythm, one loud, one quiet in his shadow. Abigail tipped her chin toward the second, hand flicking a signal Taron knew how to read. He didn't question. He spun into the half-beat and stole the second man's balance. The first lost nerve a heartbeat later. Raphael slid across the courtyard and met a tall figure with a thin smile that didn't bother to touch his eyes. The man feinted left and aimed low, as if he kept a private map of other men's ribs. Raphael didn't take the bait. He shortened the line, turned the wrist, and wrote a small, tidy pain that made the tall man's breath forget itself. Brave, the stranger measured, feet resetting. Exact, Raphael answered. An attacker broke from Abigail's blind side. Fast and low with a hook of iron, Leora's silhouette touched the doorway behind her, a basket at her hip, calm as a church. Left, Leora called, voice not loud, somehow reaching. Abigail turned with the warning already in her body. She didn't own that kind of speed, she owned warning. Raphael was the speed. He was there between her and the iron almost before the word existed, catching the swing on the hard heel of his palm and answering with a short strike that took the man's legs. Abigail's breath hit his shoulder and found heat and steadiness she resented needing and refused to refuse. Dusk pressed teeth to Raphael's restraint. Mark her, end the distraction, then ruin them. Later. You enjoy suffering and I enjoy accuracy. The fight learned the courtyard's shape and began to use it. Sound went dull at the edges, replaced by breath and the scrape of boots. Somewhere, Edrin sang 2 lines of something crude and cheerful while breaking someone's confidence over his knee. Marin blocked a strike with his forearm and corrected the angle as if fixing a crooked shelf. Taron pointed without looking. Gate. 2. No. 3. They came through that throat of darkness like men who had been taught patience. Not a rush, an approach. Polite, which made them dangerous. The tall one drifted left as if uninterested, which meant his intention had teeth. The second took the middle. The third hung back a fraction, the kind who pays last and expects to collect change. Abigail's skin prickled. Veyra's attention sharpened to a blade. Watch the tall one's shoulders. The right tells the truth. The left lies. He carries weight on the ball of his back foot. He'll pivot there. Raphael tilted his head a hair to listen to dangerous air, then moved to meet the tall man with stillness that turned movement into need. They measured each other in a few quick lines. The stranger threw a false step and followed with an honest cut. Raphael didn't let either land. He answered with a small slice that asked a pointed question near the hip, then a check at the elbow that made the man's hand reconsider its loyalty. Under a roof that is not your own, the tall one called, eyes sliding to the cuff at Abigail's wrist. You mark what will be taken. You breathed under my torch, Raphael returned, voice soft enough to make the words cut deeper. Leave under my dirt. You are bored, the stranger tried. Exact. Raphael repeated, and moved. Everything sped and slowed in the same moment. The second of the 3 feinted high and cut low toward Taron's knee. Taron had never believed in feints. He stole the cut and repaid it with interest, then passed his man to Edrin, who welcomed him with relief. Marin kept the third of the 3 occupied by refusing to give him the satisfaction of harm or victory, just effort until effort faltered. Abigail tracked the tall one, breath tight, eyes on weight and shift. He staggered, smiling like a man impressed in the worst possible way. His right hand dipped to his belt, fingers closing on something small and dark. He flicked it low, not at Raphael, past him, at the exact patch of wall where Abigail's weight rested. Move now. Veyra struck the command like a bell. Abigail threw herself sideways and down, shoulder hitting stone, breath knocked into a different shape. The small object hit where she had been and cracked, grit flowering in the air like a dirty bloom. It stung. It wanted eyes. Raphael was already there, one hand sweeping her off the wall, the other braced above her head, hip angling her into shadow. His palm rested a second at the base of her throat, not pressing, counting. The world shrank to the scrape of his breath across her mouth and the heat that soaked through cloth and skin and bone. "Anywhere wrong?" he demanded softly. "No," she answered, breath not steady, eyes stinging but open. "Good." He pivoted off her as the tall man came again along a line that would have found her if Raphael had been any other creature. He wasn't. He caught the wrist, turned it to leverage, and let bone argue with humiliation. The knife went to ground and earned a flame-lit clang. The man went to his knees, and Maren helped him the rest of the way with a palm to the chest as if tucking him in. "Stop courting and finish teaching," Edrin called, careening past with joy and purpose. "Some of us like our lessons early." The courtyard breathed as one organism. The last of the first wave dissolved into men who wanted to be elsewhere and couldn't find the door. Taron adjusted distances without barking. Leora knelt by a Nightfang's shoulder and pressed clean cloth where blood had chosen to remember gravity. "Hold," she told the body, like a mother negotiating with a fever. The body obeyed because her voice had a way of making disobedience look foolish. Rain flirted with the edge of the night and decided against it for now. The flames snapped, leaned, righted. Abigail's hands remembered their own work. She stepped into a gap and pressed her fingers to the side of a warrior's throat while Leora checked the line of a gash. The pulse was stubborn, which made sense in this house. She tied a bandage without looking at her own wrist, and hated how good the cuff looked in the firelight. Raphael arrived a breath later and refused to let anything near her skin without permission. He set his palm to the wall beside her head again, a shelter more than a pin, body between her and the next mistake. His knuckles bled in a thin line, a small truth about the cost of being exact. "You're hurt," she said, reaching. "It is other men's mistakes. Let me correct them. After. Now." His gaze dropped to her mouth when she used that tone, then forced itself back to her eyes like a man proving he could stop himself. He gave her his hand, because not giving it would have broken a different rule. She cleaned the line, wrapped it neatly, smoothed the tie with a thumb that shook once and then decided not to. Dusk purred in his bones, pleased. Let her touch. Then mark her. Not yet. You will keep saying that until never, then make me wrong. He didn't. The gate moaned softly in its hinges. Wind slid in from the north with a low old note. It carried a scent that didn't belong to the first set or the second. Silt. Iron. River memory from too far north to explain itself cleanly. The hair along Abigail's arms lifted. Veyra's ears went hard forward. More. Dusk exhaled, hungry and sure. Bring them. End them. Taron stepped to Raphael's shoulder. Different shoes. Fewer. Heavier. The kind who think before they step. Maren spit blood into the corner, grim and amused. The kind who make nights longer. Edrin bounced once on his heels like a boy before a race. Finally, someone worth upsetting. Leora's eyes found Abigail's and warmed with something that felt like courage offered in a cup. You already made your choice. Make sure he understands how much of it was yours. Raphael's hand brushed the cuff at Abigail's wrist with his knuckles, a promise and a warning, and something he didn't have language for. He looked at the skin below her ear where his scent lived, then at the gate, then back. They keep coming until the mountain teaches them a new law, he said, low, certain, or until the law on your skin tells them what they cannot afford to test. You're going to use it to win. I'm going to use everything to keep you breathing. Rain finally committed, light at first, a hiss against stone. The torches stuttered and found their strength again. The courtyard took on that sheen a storm gives, surfaces slicking into honesty. The men adjusted their feet. The walls pulled their shoulders up. The night leaned closer like a listener. 3 new shapes paused beyond the gate as if asking the mountain for permission. It didn't answer. The tallest stepped in and stopped under the first torch where the light could weigh him. He didn't look at Raphael first. He looked at Abigail, at the wrist she couldn't hide, at the place under her ear she didn't intend to. His mouth moved just enough to suggest satisfaction. Second wave, Taron measured, breath even. Different mind. Same result, Raphael returned, and the tone made the stone believe him. The tall one shifted his weight in that way that told Abigail he had taught his body not to announce himself. She couldn't hear his breath. She heard Raphael's, steady and precise. She heard her own, faster than she wanted. She heard Veyra, calm and cruel at once. Stand where he put you. Make the world come to you for once. The newcomers didn't rush. They stepped in with the arrogance of men who had decided they could write their names on other people's houses. Edrin smiled with his teeth. Marin set his feet, rolling his wrist to loosen a joint he would need. Taron drew the line again with his eyes and put a hand on a younger warrior's shoulder to push him half a step back from stupidity. The tall one spoke with a calm that had been practiced to a blade. Alpha. Raphael did not give him more body than necessary. Noise. We are here for our property. You announced your mistake under my torch twice, Raphael answered, voice soft and lethal. You will leave under my dirt twice. You mark what you cannot keep. I keep what I mark. The man's gaze slid again to Abigail as if he wanted to catalog her, turn her into a list he could check off. Something low and possessive rolled through Raphael's chest that might have been dusk, or might have been a man naming what he refused to lose. Enough talk, Edrin urged cheerfully. Let's upset them. They came, finally abandoning civility. The first broke right to draw Taron. Taron let him and gave him back to the ground politely. The second aimed for Edrin, which proved the stranger had not yet learned basic wisdom. Edrin laughed, delighted and taught hard. The tall one cut toward Raphael with a feint that would have taken a different alpha's throat. Raphael had never believed in feints. He shaved the angle off, cut the distance, and showed the man a piece of pain his body would remember in weather. Abigail didn't move. She watched. She listened. She tracked the second motion behind the first. Twice she caught a knife hand before it mattered by letting her eyes read where a shoulder lied. Once, she said a single word that pulled Marin's head up at exactly the right moment to refuse a blade that wanted his ribs more than he did. The rain thickened, making the courtyard shine and the torches spit. Raphael's hair darkened to ink. He fought closer now, keeping his shoulder within reach of her hand without looking like he was doing it. His knife work got smaller and meaner. The tall man started to tire and tried to disguise it with arrogance. Raphael didn't allow disguises in his house. You are finished, the stranger panted, still smiling in that hateable way. You keep confusing wanting with knowing. Raphael returned, not out of breath, and took the man's balance in a simple theft that sent him staggering into Marin's ready palm. It ended the way a storm does when it runs out of interest. The bodies that could leave left. The ones that couldn't became problems for morning. Night didn't get quieter so much as deeper. Rain smoothed the noise into a steady sound that made the flames look like they were thinking. Abigail exhaled and felt the tremor arrive after safety, which is always when it comes to collect. Raphael's palm was on the wall near her head again, before the tremor could embarrass her. He didn't look at it. He looked at her mouth. Then, his gaze corrected and held to her eyes. Dusk pressed hard. Now. End the question. Make it undeniable. Veyra didn't snarl this time. She came forward like warmth. Do it on our terms. Not because of fear, because the body wants and the mind agrees. Raphael drew in a breath that burned a little and tasted of rain and iron in her. Second wave will keep coming, he said quietly, as if speaking only to the space between them. Until they know what the mark means. Until they can smell it through rain. You're still using war to get what you want, so, I'm using life to keep you alive." She could have laughed. She didn't. She lifted her hand and laid 2 fingers against the leather thong circling his palm, the reminder he wore for himself. "If you do this," she told him, steady now, "it is not to silence me. It is because I am done pretending I don't want the same thing you do." His eyes flared in that way hunger has when honesty touches it. The rain hissed. Edrin whistled 2 notes and walked away to kick a stubborn hinge into sense. Taron spoke with Marin near the gate about a cairn that needed unlying. Leora gathered her cloths and stacked them as if order were a protection spell. Raphael bent close until the world narrowed to heat and breath. He didn't take her mouth. He dragged the lower half of his face along the line of her jaw once more. Slower, more deliberate. Claim layered, over claim, until the skin under his breath knew his name. He paused at the corner of her lips and did not cross. His voice found the place between a promise and a threat. "When this ends," he told her, and every part of him agreed, wolf and man in perfect accord, "we finish it where rain can hear and the walls can learn." "And if it never ends," she answered, pulse humming where his mouth hovered, "we end it anyway." Rain finally committed, hard and clean, washing blood into thin rivers along the stone. The torches hissed and steadied. Somewhere beyond the birches, the mountain moved its shoulders. The stronghold breathed, preparing for whatever the night wanted next. Raphael looked over her head to the gate, then back down to her eyes, and in that look, she understood what he had decided long before he used words. Make it undeniable. Rain made a soft roar of the night, washing blood into thin lines that ran toward the drains. Torches hissed and held. The second wave broke and scattered under firm hands and harder choices, until the courtyard settled into the heavy quiet that means work is finished and counting begins. Taron lowered his blade and looked to the gate. North lip clear. 2 ghosts left their coats behind. Marin wiped rain from his brow with the heel of his hand. They'll come back for their pride and find the door gone. Edrin nudged a stubborn hinge with his boot until it remembered manners. Let them try the hinge first. I owe it a friend. Leora moved through the aftermath with a lamp cupped against the weather, pressing cloth where it mattered, shaking her head where it didn't. Inside, all of you who still pretend you don't need a blanket, try being human for 5 breaths. Raphael stood in the center of it, rain stitching dark into his hair, eyes gone deep amber around the edges. His hand found Abigail's wrist without mistake and turned her toward the door. Inside. You haven't finished. I have begun the part that matters. Taron glanced between them as if reading a book he already knew the ending of. We'll mind the slope. Marin rolled his shoulder and grinned with half his mouth. Go tell the house what it already decided. Edrin barked a laugh. Make it loud. Leora's eyes warmed. The kettle remembers heat. Raphael led Abigail through the inner door and down the quiet corridor. The house breathed around them, relieved and restless. The heavy door in the back hall stayed silent, as if something on the other side listened and chose not to answer. Rain tapped the small panes, steady as a pulse. In his quarters, the lamplight found edges and gentled them. Heat held to the stone. The carved screen made the bed a suggestion rather than a command. He closed the door with deliberate care and set his palm flat to the panel for a single count, as if warning the night not to follow. Abigail stood in the middle of the rug, rain beating at the tips of her hair, the cuff warm against her pulse. Her chest rose and fell in hard, clean pulls. She kept her back straight because she refused to give exhaustion the first bow. You're using victory like a leash. I'm using time before it runs. You want to mark me because fear makes the argument easier. I want to mark you because truth does. Truth that I never agreed to. You walked into it. Dusk prowled at the edges of his patience, pleased and impatient both. End the question. Put your mouth where her pulse asks for teeth. Veyra pressed her muzzle along Abigail's ribs from the inside, breath hot and honest. He is holding himself with both hands. Make him put them to better use. Raphael came forward slowly, each step a choice he let her watch. He stopped close enough that rain on her lashes reflected in his eyes. He lifted his bound palm, the leather thong creaking when he flexed, and brushed his knuckles once over the cuff. They will keep coming, voice low, not pleading, not cold. Not because you are guilty, because you matter, because you are leverage, because hurting me would be a story they would enjoy telling each other in the dark. This ends when the law on your skin is louder than their want. You could protect me without claiming me. I have, it is not loud enough. You want me because danger makes you honest. I want you because I have eyes. Her breath stuttered and caught. Rain deepened outside, a steady drum. The lamp flame leaned and stood again. He did not touch her face yet. He gave her the space of a single choice. Say the word, voice roughened now. Stay unmarked and let me keep doing this the hard way, or let me finish what began the moment you ran and I followed. Veyra lifted her head and looked across the thin place where instinct and thought share heat. We are already running the same direction. Abigail's throat worked. If you do this, it isn't to silence me, it isn't to win. It's because I am done pretending I don't belong where I already spend my breath. Then come here. He reached and took her wrist. No hurry, no shock. Turning her palm up as if reading a story written there. When his fingers closed, the cuff warmed under them. He eased her nearer, until their chests almost touched and rain scent met the low heat of the room. His other hand rose and hovered by her jaw, asking. She did not step back. Tell me no, barely more than air. No, she whispered, and then her mouth curved. To leaving. The first touch happened like weather finally choosing to break. His mouth found hers with deliberate pressure, not an argument, a declaration. Heat surged in one long, helpless arc. Her fingers closed on his shirt at the shoulder, then slid up to the rough line of his throat as if to feel the engine that ran him. His breath answered, darker now. Control willing to be a bridge instead of a wall. Dusk spread like night through his bones. Take, slow. Make it last, and then make it loud. He walked her backward until the carved screen brushed her shoulder, and the edge of the bed pressed the back of her knees. His hands skimmed her rain-damp hair, her face, the slope of her neck, mapping what he had already learned by scent and restraint. She pulled him down and forced subtlety to confess how badly it wanted to be more. Clothes were not torn. They were forgotten, loosened by impatient fingers that knew buttons and laces by heart, even when they had never met these ones. Skin learned heat where cloth had been. Her ankle protested once and his hand slid down, adjusting, supporting, refusing to let old pain steal anything from this hour. She made a sound that proved gratitude can be fierce. Tell me if anything hurts wrong. It hurts right. Good. He lowered her to the mattress like an oath laid on an altar. The lamplight found the line of her collarbone, the small pulse there beating under thin skin. His mouth traced a slow path along her jaw to that place he had scented, laying claim in heat and breath until her name became a sound in his throat. She met him with hands that didn't ask permission and hips that answered truthfully. Every breath turned into a thread binding to a thread. Veyra's voice went low and sure, yes, this more, let him in and take him in the same heartbeat. Their bodies found a rhythm that belonged to neither and both, a cadence as old as their kind and as new as rain on this stone. He pressed his forehead to hers for a count as if to memorize how her breath changed at the top of each wave. She lifted to meet him and felt his control shiver and still hold, the thong cutting into his palm, where he refused to be anything but careful around what he adored. Look at me, he breathed. She did, and the air folded around the sight. They moved, not gentle, not cruel, perfectly placed, each thrust a decision, each gasp a vote counted and kept. The room blurred to heat and wet and the soft scrape of skin on linen. The house seemed to lean in to listen. Dusk rose in a slow column of fire. Now. Mark. She belongs to us because she chooses to. Veyra stood and bared her throat and laughed. Do it before I sink my teeth into his shoulder for forgetting how. Raphael's mouth slid to the juncture where neck becomes shoulder, breath scalding there. He paused one last time, choosing, waiting for her to choose too. Her hand fisted in his hair and tugged him down. Hard, permission turned into command. Now! His teeth closed where his breath had been. Not savage, not soft, absolute. Heat flared, bright and clean. Her cry tore through both of them and turned into his name halfway out of her mouth. The mark broke skin and remade it. Blood rose in the smallest bloom and his tongue caught it, sealing flesh and vow at once. The bond hit like light through water, cool and hot together, threading thought and instinct, wolf and human, until there was no place where one ended and the other began. Dusk held inside him, triumphant and reverent. Ours. Veyra answered with a shiver that rippled down to her hands. Ours. Keep him honest, or kill him later. Pleasure rose hard and arrested, then broke open deep and wide. He held her through it with the kind of strength that makes other forms of strength irrelevant. She pulled him with her and felt the moment he let himself fall, the chain biting his palm as he clenched around the only mercy worth keeping. The world narrowed to heat and breath and the low animal sound they made together. When it eased, it didn't end. It settled, pulsing through bone like tide in a cave. He stayed over her, braced on one forearm, the other hand cupping her jaw so his thumb could find the trembling at her pulse and learn it into stillness. The room smelled of rain and smoke and the iron-sweet tang of a mark newly laid. He pressed his mouth to the wound again, gentler, honoring the sting he had asked for. You belong to yourself, voice rough and shaken, and to me because you chose it. I belong to no one who can't say that sentence exactly like that. Then carve it into me and check it later. She laughed, breathless, weaker than she liked to be. I will. He rolled to his side and drew her with him, settling her against his chest with an ease that spoke of a man who had imagined this often enough to have rehearsed the practical parts. The cuff rested against his ribs. The mark throbbed once, twice, then calmed into a steady burn that felt like safety finally learning how to touch without breaking. Outside, the rain deepened and the torches guttered and flared. Distantly, from the yard, a single long howl rose. Not challenge, acknowledgement. It was answered by another, and then another, until the stronghold stones ticked with sound. Taron's voice cut across it, calm and satisfied. Edrin whooped for the joy of it. Marin muttered something about sleep that was really about relief. Leora's laugh drifted like a warm cloth. Abigail's fingers traced the leather thong on Raphael's palm, finding the place where it had bitten skin. Take this off. Now. Yes. He untied it slowly and let the thong fall to the table. A small surrender that changed nothing and meant everything. His now bare hand slid to the mark at her shoulder and cupped it, protective without pressure. The back hall door scratched once, soft and uncertain, as if something behind it had felt the bond snap into place and reconsidered its habits. Raphael's head turned a fraction, listening. It will stay quiet, he murmured. You sure? I know what it was listening for. And if it barks again, I will teach it manners later. You and your later. My favorite word until now. She breathed against his throat, slow, not because he told her to, because rest had finally decided she deserved it. The quarters felt different, as if the wall stones had unlocked one more shoulder and sat easier under their own weight. He looked down at her, at damp hair on the pillow, at the lamplight along cheek and mouth, at the mark he had given and she had taken. Then up to the window, where rain painted its patient script. Dusk curled and slept like a sated storm. Veyra lay with paws outstretched and eyes half-lidded, content and dangerous in the same breath. You will not be hunted anymore, he said, no performance in it, only bone. Not by them. Not by anyone who thinks a story is smoother when a healer bleeds. And by you. I do not hunt what I cannot live without. You already won then. I did not come here to win, I came to keep. She shifted onto her back and pulled him down by the shirt, kissing him once more. Slow, grateful, unapologetically hungry. His hand slid over her ribs and settled at her waist as if it had found home. He pulled the blanket Leora had left up over them both and tucked it against the chill the rain would bring later. Sleep, he urged. I will stand watch until morning. You will lie here and pretend the house needs your eyes. It does. It needs you to stop moving. I can do both. She smiled into his throat. Of course you can. A beat of silence lay warm between them. The house shifted, satisfied. Somewhere the gate groaned as men said it true. The lamp lowered its flame as if respectfully turning its head. Raphael lowered his mouth to her ear, voice a thread meant for this room and no other. No one will touch you again. And I'll choose who can reach me. Choose me. I just did. He breathed once like a man allowed to put weight down. The mark pulsed under his hand as if agreeing. The rain pressed harder and then softened. The wolves outside settled to low conversation with the dark. He kissed the mark, then her mouth, then the place between her brows where worry had lived too long. He lay still with her heartbeat under his hand and let the stronghold finish learning what it meant to hold them. Sleep, he whispered again, a command gentled into a promise. I will if you do. I will when you do. Her breath shifted slower now, honest. The quiet took them, but did not take the vows with it. The night listened and found itself full. Raphael's eyes mapped the room one more time. The screen, the kettle, the window, the door, then closed. He spoke once more into the hush. A line he wanted the walls to remember and the mountain to carry. The Shadow Alpha doesn't take what's his, he keeps it forever.